Across our modern world, behind government barriers and natural defenses, lie places so terrifying that they defy human comprehension. Locations where the very air can finish you, where ancient curses carry legal weight, and where stepping foot uninvited could mean vanishing forever without a trace. These are not the manufactured scares of haunted houses or the fictional terrors of Hollywood, but real places documented by scientists, guarded by military forces, and marked by countless deaths throughout history. Today, we journey into the forbidden corners of our planet, where nature's deadliest creations meet humanity's darkest chapters, and where even the bravest explorers dare not tread. So fasten your seatbelt as we explore these cursed coordinates. But be warned, some knowledge, once gained, can never be forgotten. 1. Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, Ukraine, radioactive wasteland frozen in time. In the early hours of April 26, 1986, the impossible happened. The atom itself turned against humanity in a catastrophe so profound that it created a 30-kilometer circle of forbidden Earth that remains deadly to this day. The Chernobyl Exclusion Zone stands as perhaps the most terrifying man-made environment on our planet, where invisible death stalks every footstep and time itself seems frozen in the moment disaster struck. What makes Chernobyl uniquely horrifying is not just the scale of the catastrophe, 400 times more radiation than Hiroshima, but the way it transformed an entire landscape into a silent predator. Reactor 4's explosion released a radioactive cloud that spread across Europe, but within the exclusion zone itself, radiation levels vary wildly and unpredictably. Cesium-137 and strontium-90 create invisible hotspots where a single step can deliver a lethal dose, with some areas reaching 50,000 kilobecquerels per square meter, enough to kill within hours. The abandoned city of Pripyat, evacuated within 36 hours of the disaster, serves as the zone's most haunting landmark. This once thriving community of 49,000 residents now stands as a perfectly preserved Soviet time capsule, where children's toys lie scattered in kindergartens, dinner plates remain set on tables, and the famous Ferris wheel, which never opened to the public, rusts eternally against gray skies. Yet this preservation comes at a deadly cost, as every surface, every object, every blade of grass carries the potential for contamination. The Red Forest presents Chernobyl's most apocalyptic scene. For square kilometers of pine trees died instantly from acute radiation exposure, their needles turning bright red before the forest became a graveyard of skeletal remains. The dead trees were bulldozed and buried, but the soil beneath remains so contaminated that forest fires, which occur regularly, release radioactive particles into the atmosphere, spreading contamination far beyond the zone's borders. Perhaps most unsettling are the reports from the 600,000 liquidators who worked to contain the disaster. These brave souls, many of whom died from radiation sickness, described a world where metal tasted sweet, where birds fell dead from the sky, and where the very ground glowed with an otherworldly blue light. Some reported that their flashlight beams bent strangely in the most contaminated areas, as if radiation itself was warping reality. Today, nature has reclaimed much of the zone in ways both beautiful and terrifying. Wolves, boar, and even brown bears roam freely through abandoned towns, their bodies carrying genetic mutations that scientists are only beginning to understand. The Przewalski's horses, introduced in the 1990s, have thrived in this radioactive wilderness, raising disturbing questions about what long-term radiation exposure might mean for evolution itself. The zone's dangers extend far beyond radiation. Abandoned buildings collapse without warning, their Soviet-era construction failing after decades of neglect. Underground spaces flood with contaminated water, while scavengers have stripped valuable metals, leaving behind unstable structures that could trap unwary explorers. Even the weather poses unique threats, as rain can wash radioactive particles into concentrated pools, creating sudden radiation hotspots. Since Russia's 2022 invasion, when soldiers dug trenches in the most contaminated soil and military vehicles stirred up radioactive dust, the zone has become even more dangerous and completely off-limits to civilians. The very ground these soldiers disturbed had been undisturbed for decades, containing layers of contamination that scientists had hoped would remain buried forever. Yet perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Chernobyl is its permanence. with a half-life of 30 years for cesium-137. The zone will remain dangerous for centuries to come, a testament to humanity's ability to create destruction that outlasts civilizations themselves. 2. Poveglia Island, Italy, island of 100,000 plague victims. Rising from the dark waters of the Venetian lagoon lies a small island that harbors one of history's most concentrated collections of human suffering. Poveglia Island, spanning merely 17 acres, carries within its soil the remains of over 100,000 souls who met their end in unimaginable agony, making it quite possibly the most death-saturated piece of land on Earth. The island's nightmare began in 1348, when the Black Death swept across Europe like an unstoppable wave of mortality. As plague victims overwhelmed Venice's capacity to bury the dead, authorities designated Poveglia as a quarantine station where the infected were shipped to die in isolation. But this was no hospital. It was a place where the living were thrown together with the dying and the dead, creating a hell that persisted for over 400 years. During subsequent plague outbreaks in 1630 and 1636, Poveglia's role as a dumping ground for disease intensified. Ships arrived daily, loaded with bodies and those still clinging to life, only to dump their human cargo onto growing piles of corpses. When burial became impossible due to the sheer volume of death, authorities began burning bodies in massive pyres that burned continuously for months. The fires burned so hot and so long that the soil itself transformed. Today, nearly 50% of Poveglia's earth consists of human ash. Local fishermen refuse to fish in the waters surrounding Poveglia, claiming their nets regularly pull up human bones, skulls, and femurs that continue to wash ashore with each tide. The island's beaches literally glisten with bone fragments and ash, creating a shoreline that crunches underfoot with the remains of plague victims. Some visitors report that after rain, human teeth can be found scattered across the island's paths like macabre pebbles. The island's final chapter of horror began in 1922, when authorities converted the abandoned quarantine station into a mental hospital. Under the direction of a sadistic doctor whose name has been lost to history, the facility became a chamber of unspeakable medical experiments. Patients were subjected to crude lobotomies performed with basic tools, hammers, chisels, and hand drills, while conscious and without anesthesia. The doctor believed mental illness could be cured through increasingly barbaric procedures that caused indescribable suffering. Legend holds that this doctor was eventually driven mad by the screams of his victims and the whispered voices of plague victims that seemed to emanate from the island's soil. In 1930, he allegedly threw himself from the hospital's bell tower, but witnesses claim he survived the fall only to be choked to death by a mysterious fog that rose from the ground. Staff members reported that his body showed signs of strangulation, though no living person could have inflicted such wounds. The mental hospital closed in 1968, leaving behind buildings filled with rusted medical equipment, restraint devices, and rooms where human suffering reached unimaginable depths. The bell tower, where the doctor met his end, still stands today, its windows like dark eyes staring across the lagoon toward Venice. Local legends claim the tower's bell still rings on its own during storms, despite containing no bell mechanism. Modern Italy has declared Poveglia completely off-limits to the public, with police boats patrolling the waters to prevent unauthorized landings. The few researchers granted access report an oppressive atmosphere that affects even skeptical scientists. Temperature readings show unexplained cold spots, electromagnetic equipment malfunctions regularly, and many visitors report feeling watched by unseen presences. What makes Poveglia truly terrifying is not supernatural speculation, but the documented reality of its history. This small island processed human death on an industrial scale for centuries, creating a concentration of suffering that defies comprehension. The soil analysis confirms the presence of human remains throughout the island's foundation, while historical records detail atrocities that would be considered war crimes by today's standards. Today, Poveglia remains abandoned and forbidden, a small island carrying the weight of 100,000 deaths in soil that still yields bones with every rainfall. 3. Snake Island, Brazil, 4,000 deadly vipers on 43 hectares. 43 hectares of land should barely register as more than a small farm, yet Ilha de Queimada Grande, Snake Island, off the coast of Brazil contains enough concentrated death to kill thousands of people within hours. This forbidden island harbors what scientists consider the world's deadliest ecosystem, a population of 2,000 to 4,000 golden lancehead vipers with venom so potent it literally melts human flesh. The true horror of Snake Island lies in the mathematical impossibility of survival. With one snake per square meter in the densest areas, walking across the island means stepping within striking distance of multiple deadly serpents with every footfall. These are not ordinary snakes. Isolated from the mainland for 11,000 years, the golden lanceheads evolved into killing machines with venom 3 to 5 times more potent than their mainland relatives. The venom's effects read like a catalog of biological horror. Hemotoxic compounds attack blood cells and blood vessels, causing massive internal hemorrhaging. Kidney failure occurs within hours as toxins destroy cellular function. The venom literally dissolves tissue at the injection site, creating necrotic wounds that spread outward from the bite. Most terrifying of all, neurotoxic elements attack the brain, causing hemorrhaging that leads to death even if other symptoms are treated successfully. Local legends speak of the last lighthouse keeper family who lived on the island in the early 1900s. According to maritime records, their bodies were discovered by a relief team, with evidence suggesting snakes had entered their house through open windows during the night. The entire family, man, wife, and 3 children, were found dead from multiple snake bites. The lighthouse was automated immediately afterward, ensuring no human would ever again need to remain on the island overnight. The Brazilian Navy maintains absolute control over access to Snake Island, with armed patrols enforcing a complete civilian ban. The only exceptions are researchers accompanied by mandatory medical personnel and antivenoms, though even these precautions offer little comfort, as golden lancehead venom can kill within an hour, faster than evacuation to mainland hospitals. The few scientific expeditions that have visited the island operate under extreme safety protocols, with researchers wearing thick boots, long pants, and maintaining constant vigilance for serpents that can strike from trees, rocks, and undergrowth. What makes these snakes particularly terrifying is their hunting strategy. Unlike ground-dwelling vipers, golden lanceheads are arboreal hunters that evolved to catch birds in flight. This means they can strike from above without warning, having developed the ability to inject massive venom doses that kill birds instantly before they can fly away and die elsewhere. When applied to humans, this lightning-fast delivery system ensures no opportunity for survival without immediate medical intervention. The island's ecosystem creates a perfect breeding ground for maximum lethality. With no ground-dwelling mammals to hunt, the snakes concentrated their evolution on perfecting bird-killing techniques. This specialization produced serpents with reflexes faster than human reaction time and venom designed to cause instant incapacitation followed by rapid death. Fishermen refused to approach within several miles of the island, claiming to have seen snakes swimming in the surrounding waters. While golden lanceheads are not known to be strong swimmers, the possibility of encountering them in the water adds another layer of terror to an already impossible survival situation. Recent conservation concerns have emerged as the snake population faces habitat pressure and genetic bottlenecking from thousands of years of isolation. Ironically, these world champion killers may be vulnerable to extinction, though their protected status ensures the island will remain forbidden regardless of population changes. The Brazilian government has repeatedly rejected proposals for scientific research stations or any form of permanent human presence on Snake Island. Environmental protection laws, combined with obvious safety concerns, guarantee that this 43-hectare death trap will remain one of the few places on Earth where humans are absolutely forbidden to tread. 4. Area 51, Nevada. Deadly force authorized against trespassers. In the Nevada desert, surrounded by mountains and endless expanses of forbidden territory, lies the most secretive military installation in the United States, a place where the government explicitly authorizes killing anyone who attempts unauthorized entry. Area 51, officially known as Groom Lake, represents the ultimate intersection of national security paranoia and legitimate deadly force, where curiosity can quite literally cost your life. The facility's legal framework for lethal force stems from Title 18 U.S.C. Section 1382, which criminalizes trespassing on military installations, combined with Nevada state laws permitting deadly force to protect classified installations. Signs posted around the perimeter state clearly, "Use of deadly force authorized." Words that carry the full weight of federal law and military policy. Armed security personnel, known as camo dudes, patrol the area with legal authority to shoot trespassers on sight without warning. What makes Area 51 uniquely terrifying is the combination of legitimate military secrecy and cultural mythology that has surrounded the facility since 1955. The base has tested the most classified aircraft in American military history: the U-2 spy plane, State Route 71 Blackbird, F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter, and aircraft whose specifications remain classified decades later. These genuine military secrets create real security concerns that justify extreme protective measures, including lethal force. The facility's remote location in the Nevada Test and Training Range covers 2.9 million acres of restricted airspace, creating a buffer zone larger than some countries. This isolation means that anyone reaching the facility's perimeter has already traveled through miles of forbidden territory, demonstrating clear intent to breach national security. Unlike civilian properties where warning shots or non-lethal force might be employed, Area 51 security protocols assume hostile intent from anyone approaching the facility. Legal consequences for trespassing extend far beyond immediate physical danger. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1382, basic trespassing charges carry up to 6 months imprisonment and substantial fines. However, organized attempts to breach the facility could trigger terrorism charges under the Patriot Act, with potential sentences of 25 to 35 years per incident. The 2019 Storm Area 51 event demonstrated how social media jokes about the facility can quickly escalate into federal investigations and serious legal consequences. The psychological warfare employed around Area 51 adds another layer of intimidation. Security personnel use advanced surveillance technology to track potential intruders from miles away, often approaching trespassers with detailed knowledge of their movements and personal information. This demonstration of technological superiority serves as a warning that the facility's defensive capabilities extend far beyond visible security measures. Former security personnel have described the facility's defensive systems as including ground sensors, motion detectors, and surveillance equipment that can track individual movements across vast distances. The camo dudes, who patrol the perimeter, operate from concealed positions and communicate through encrypted channels, creating an atmosphere of omnipresent surveillance that affects even legal visitors to nearby public lands. The facility's legitimacy as a classified military installation removes any possibility of legal protection for trespassers. Unlike civilian properties where excessive force might face legal scrutiny, military installations enjoy broad legal protections for security measures. Courts have consistently upheld the government's right to use lethal force to protect classified facilities, making Area 51 one of the few places in America where killing civilians faces no legal consequences. Recent technological developments have only increased the facility's security capabilities. Satellite imagery shows expanded perimeter defenses, while reports from aviation enthusiasts describe increasingly sophisticated surveillance systems that track visitors to nearby public viewing areas. The combination of legitimate military secrecy, advanced defensive technology, and explicit legal authorization for lethal force makes Area 51 a uniquely dangerous destination for anyone foolish enough to test its defenses. The facility represents the ultimate forbidden zone, a place where genuine national security concerns override individual rights and where curiosity about government secrets can result in immediate death without legal recourse or public accountability. 5. North Sentinel Island, India. Kill-on-site isolated tribe. In the crystal-clear waters of the Andaman Sea lies a 60-square-kilometer island where time stopped 30,000 years ago, and where setting foot uninvited means certain death at the hands of Earth's last truly isolated people. North Sentinel Island stands as humanity's most dangerous anthropological enigma, a place where Stone Age warriors guard their territory with deadly precision and where the Indian government itself will not prosecute murder. The Sentinelese tribe, numbering between 50 and 400 individuals, represents one of the last uncontacted peoples on Earth. For approximately 30,000 to 38,000 years, they have lived in complete isolation, developing a culture and language entirely unknown to the outside world. But what makes them truly terrifying is their unwavering hostility toward outsiders. They kill intruders on sight, without negotiation, without warning, and without mercy. The island's reputation for deadly violence is not based on legend but on documented killings that continue to this day. In 2006, 2 Indian fishermen who drifted too close to the shore were killed immediately, their boat found later with their bodies riddled with arrows. The most internationally publicized incident occurred in 2018, when American missionary John Allen Chow attempted to make contact with the tribe. Despite multiple warnings and illegal entry into the protected zone, Chow was killed within hours of reaching the beach. His body was seen by fishermen being dragged across the sand and buried, never to be recovered. What makes the Sentinelese particularly formidable is their sophisticated understanding of their territorial waters and their tactical approach to defense. They have been observed using canoes to approach vessels that venture too close, launching coordinated arrow attacks with remarkable accuracy. During the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, when an Indian Coast Guard helicopter flew over the island to check for survivors, Sentinelese warriors emerged from the jungle and fired arrows at the aircraft, demonstrating that even natural disasters do not soften their rejection of outside contact. The Indian government has established a 5 nautical mile exclusion zone around the island, enforced by Navy patrols with orders to prevent any unauthorized approach. The 1956 Protection of Aboriginal Tribes Regulation makes contact with the Sentinelese a criminal offense, but more significantly, Indian law explicitly protects the tribe's right to kill intruders in self-defense. This creates a unique legal situation where murder is not only unpunished but actively protected by federal law. The deadliness of North Sentinel Island extends beyond immediate violence. Any contact with the Sentinelese could trigger devastating epidemics, as the tribe has no immunity to common diseases that colonization introduced to other populations. Common cold, flu, or measles could kill the entire population within weeks. A biological genocide that would eliminate one of humanity's last links to our prehistoric past. Anthropologists studying the tribe from a distance have observed sophisticated tool-making abilities, complex social structures, and survival techniques that have remained unchanged for millennia. The Sentinelese craft metal-tipped arrows from shipwreck debris, demonstrating adaptability while maintaining cultural isolation. They have survived ice ages, sea level changes, and natural disasters through knowledge systems that predate written history. The island's geography creates perfect conditions for sustained isolation and defense. Dense jungle provides cover for warriors, while coral reefs and strong currents make naval approach extremely difficult. The Sentinelese have turned these natural defenses into a fortress that has successfully repelled every attempt at contact for over a century. Recent satellite imagery shows the tribe maintaining traditional lifestyles with no evidence of agriculture, instead relying on hunting, fishing, and gathering techniques that sustained them through tens of thousands of years. Their ability to thrive in complete isolation while maintaining active hostility toward the modern world makes them perhaps the most successful isolationist society in human history. North Sentinel Island remains the one place on Earth where Stone Age law supersedes modern civilization, where arrows trump guns, and where humanity's oldest surviving culture defends itself with lethal force that governments dare not challenge. 6. Aokigahara Forest, Japan, the suicide forest where compasses fail. At the base of Mount Fuji, where ancient lava flows created a landscape of twisted trees and eternal shadows, lies a forest so psychologically disturbing that it has become synonymous with death itself. Aokigahara, known throughout the world as the Suicide Forest, represents a perfect storm of geological anomalies, cultural mythology, and documented psychological phenomena that transform 35 square kilometers of woodland into Japan's most feared location. The forest's reputation for death stems from a horrifying statistical reality. Over 100 documented suicides occur here annually, making it the second most popular suicide location in the world after the Golden Gate Bridge. But what makes Aokigahara uniquely terrifying is not just the frequency of death, but the way the forest itself seems designed to facilitate and conceal human suffering. Formed over 1,000 years ago by lava flows from Mount Fuji's last major eruption, Aokigahara sits atop a foundation of hardened volcanic rock with extremely high iron content. This geological composition creates electromagnetic anomalies that interfere with compass readings and GPS signals, making navigation nearly impossible once deep within the forest. Visitors report watches stopping, cell phones losing signal, and compasses spinning wildly, leaving anyone who ventures off marked paths potentially lost forever in a maze of identical-looking trees. The forest's acoustic properties intensify its psychological effects. The dense canopy of interwoven branches creates a sound-dampening environment that muffles normal forest noise to unnatural levels. Visitors describe an oppressive silence broken only by their own breathing and footsteps, creating sensory deprivation that can trigger panic attacks and disorientation. This unnatural quiet has been measured by researchers, who found sound levels significantly lower than typical forest environments. Dr. Takahashi's landmark 1988 psychological study documented cases of psychogenic amnesia among suicide attempt survivors found in Aokigahara. These individuals showed no prior mental health issues but experienced complete memory loss and spatial disorientation after spending extended time in the forest. The study suggested that the forest's environmental factors, electromagnetic interference, sensory deprivation, and isolation could trigger acute psychological episodes in otherwise healthy individuals. The forest's cultural associations with death stretch back centuries, connected to the ancient practice of ubasut, abandoning elderly family members in remote locations during times of famine. Traditional Japanese folklore describes Aokigahara as inhabited by yurei, angry spirits, of those who died alone and unremembered. These cultural narratives create expectation effects that influence modern visitors, with many reporting supernatural encounters that can be explained through psychological suggestion combined with the forest's naturally disorienting environment. Search and rescue operations in Aokigahara reveal the practical horrors of the forest's geography. The dense undergrowth and irregular lava rock terrain make systematic searches extremely difficult, while the electromagnetic interference prevents standard radio communication between search teams. Bodies can remain undiscovered for years, with some found only by accident as hikers stumble across skeletal remains in remote areas. The Japanese government has implemented extensive suicide prevention measures throughout the forest, including multilingual signs with suicide prevention hotlines and regular patrols by police and volunteers. However, these efforts face the challenge of the forest's vast size and maze-like interior, where someone determined to disappear can easily avoid detection. What makes Aokigahara particularly disturbing is how its natural properties seem perfectly designed to trap and disorient visitors. The combination of electromagnetic interference, acoustic dampening, dense vegetation, and challenging terrain creates conditions where even experienced hikers can become lost within minutes of leaving marked trails. The forest's ability to interfere with modern navigation technology while providing perfect concealment for human remains creates a genuinely dangerous environment that justifies its terrifying reputation. Recent scientific studies have confirmed that Aokigahara's unique geological and environmental characteristics create measurable psychological effects on visitors, validating centuries of cultural fear while providing rational explanations for the forest's deadly reputation. 7. Eastern State Penitentiary, Pennsylvania torture chambers and psychological horror. In the heart of Philadelphia stands a Gothic fortress that pioneered a form of psychological torture so effective it drove inmates to madness and inspired prison design worldwide. Eastern State Penitentiary, operational from 1829 to 1971, represents humanity's most systematic attempt to break the human spirit through architectural design and solitary confinement, creating a template for suffering that influenced over 300 prisons across the globe. The prison's revolutionary Pennsylvania system was designed around the concept that complete isolation would force criminals to confront their sins and achieve spiritual redemption. In practice, this meant locking inmates in individual cells for 23 hours daily with no human contact. No books, no work, and no stimulation beyond a single skylight designed to represent the eye of God. This system, praised by reformers as humane, actually constituted one of the most sophisticated forms of psychological torture ever implemented on an industrial scale. The prison's radial design, with 7 cell blocks extending like spokes from a central hub, allowed a single guard to observe hundreds of inmates while maintaining their complete isolation from each other. Cells measured just 8 by 12 feet, with stone walls thick enough to prevent any sound from passing between them. When inmates were removed from their cells for their single hour of daily exercise, they were forced to wear hoods to prevent them from seeing other prisoners or developing any sense of the prison's layout. The psychological effects of this system became apparent within months of the prison's opening. Inmates began exhibiting behaviors that would now be recognized as severe mental illness. Catatonia, violent outbursts, self-mutilation, and complete breaks from reality. Many prisoners spent their entire sentences in solitary confinement, emerging after decades as broken individuals incapable of functioning in society. The prison's most notorious punishment device was the iron gag, a metal contraption that fitted over an inmate's tongue and was connected to chains attached to their wrists. Any movement of the arms pulled the tongue, causing excruciating pain and often permanent injury. Inmate Matthias Mackenzie died in 1833 when the iron gag tore his tongue and caused him to bleed to death, making him the first documented victim of what amounted to torture disguised as discipline. Charles Dickens visited Eastern State Penitentiary in 1842 and described the experience as witnessing rigid, strict, and hopeless solitary confinement that inflicted psychological damage immeasurably worse than any torture of the body. His account detailed inmates who had been driven insane by years of isolation, including men who had forgotten how to speak and others who compulsively paced their cells in identical patterns for hours each day. The prison housed some of America's most notorious criminals, including bank robber Willie Sutton and Al Capone, who occupied a luxuriously furnished cell complete with Persian rugs and fine furniture, demonstrating how corruption undermined the system's supposed equality. However, most inmates experienced decades of mental torture that left them permanently damaged, with many requiring institutionalization in mental hospitals after their release. Today, Eastern State Penitentiary operates as a museum, but the building itself presents serious structural dangers. Decades of abandonment have weakened the Victorian-era architecture, with many areas designated as hard hat zones due to falling debris and unstable masonry. The prison's crumbling infrastructure creates genuine physical hazards, while the preserved cells and torture devices provide visceral reminders of systematic human suffering. The psychological atmosphere of Eastern State Penitentiary affects visitors in measurable ways. The combination of deteriorating architecture, documented history of torture, and preserved punishment devices creates an environment where the weight of 142 years of human suffering becomes tangible. Many visitors report feelings of claustrophobia, anxiety, and depression after touring the facility, demonstrating how spaces designed for psychological torture retain their power to disturb decades after their abandonment. The prison's legacy extends far beyond its walls, as the Pennsylvania system influenced international prison design and criminal justice philosophy for over a century, spreading psychological torture techniques worldwide under the guise of enlightened reform. 8. Paris catacombs, restricted areas. France, 6 million dead in forbidden tunnels. Beneath the City of Light lies a shadow realm that transforms the romance of Paris into a nightmare of bones and death. 200 kilometers of tunnel containing the remains of over 6 million people, where illegal explorers risk becoming permanent additions to the collection. The Paris catacombs restricted sections represent one of the world's most extensive underground labyrinths, where wrong turns can lead to death by hypothermia, starvation, or simply vanishing forever in passages that remain unmapped after centuries. The catacombs began as limestone quarries that supplied stone for building medieval Paris, creating a honeycomb of underground passages that undermined the city's foundation. By the 18th century, overflowing cemeteries created a public health crisis that prompted authorities to relocate millions of corpses into the abandoned quarries. Workers spent years transferring remains from graveyards across Paris, arranging skulls and femurs into the macabre displays that give the catacombs their terrifying beauty. The legal tourist route covers only 1.5 kilometers of the total network, leaving vast unmapped sections where illegal explorers known as cataphiles risk their lives pursuing underground adventures. These forbidden areas contain everything from flooded chambers to unstable ceiling sections that collapse without warning. The constant temperature of 14 degrees Celsius 57 degrees Fahrenheit creates hypothermia risks for anyone trapped underground, while the maze-like layout makes rescue operations extremely difficult. The most famous documented death in the catacombs belongs to Philibert Espert, a doorkeeper who entered the tunnels in 1793 searching for liquor and was found 11 years later near an exit, his keys still clutched in his skeletal hand. His preserved remains, discovered just meters from safety, demonstrate how the catacombs' confusing layout can trap even those familiar with underground spaces. Modern explorers have reported finding more recent remains, though authorities rarely publicize such discoveries to avoid encouraging dangerous exploration. The psychological effects of the catacombs stem from complete immersion in human mortality on an unprecedented scale. Walls constructed entirely from human skulls create visual experiences that overwhelm the human capacity to process death. The artistic arrangements of bones, decorative patterns made from femurs, archways constructed from rib cages, crosses formed from various skeletal elements, transform death into decoration in ways that profoundly disturb most visitors. Illegal exploration of restricted sections carries severe legal consequences, with fines reaching €60,000 and potential imprisonment for trespassing in protected historical sites. Special police units patrol the tunnels using advanced surveillance equipment, but the network's immense size makes comprehensive monitoring impossible. Caught explorers face confiscation of equipment, substantial legal penalties, and potential charges related to cultural heritage destruction. The catacombs' most dangerous areas include flooded sections where water levels can rise rapidly, unstable zones where limestone mining created structural weaknesses, and dead-end passages where explorers can become trapped by cave-ins. Some sections require crawling through spaces barely large enough for human bodies, while others open into vast chambers where falling debris creates constant hazards. Modern cataphile culture has developed around illegal exploration, with experienced explorers maintaining secret maps and establishing underground camps in abandoned chambers. However, this subculture regularly experiences casualties, including cases where exploration groups become lost for days and require extensive rescue operations. The French authorities estimate that dozens of people have died in the catacombs over the past century, though exact numbers remain unknown due to the network's vast size and the secretive nature of illegal exploration. The catacombs represent a unique form of architectural horror, a space where human engineering created the infrastructure for housing millions of corpses in tunnels that can easily claim more lives. The combination of structural dangers, hypothermia risks, navigation challenges, and complete immersion in human mortality creates an environment where death surrounds visitors both literally and figuratively. The restricted sections of the Paris catacombs remain one of the few places where exploring human curiosity can quite literally lead to joining the millions of dead already housed within the tunnels. 9. Hashima Island, Japan. Crumbling concrete prison of forced laborers. 15 kilometers off the coast of Nagasaki, a concrete fortress rises from the sea like the decaying skeleton of some prehistoric beast. Hashima Island, known ominously as Battleship Island for its ship-like silhouette, stands as one of the most concentrated monuments to human suffering ever constructed. A place where industrial ambition and wartime brutality created a vertical hell that housed over 5,000 people on just 6.3 hectares of artificial land. Built between 1887 and 1974 to extract coal from underwater mines, Hashima Island achieved the dubious distinction of becoming the most densely populated place on Earth. At its 1959 peak, the island's population density reached 139,100 people per square kilometer, 9 times greater than modern-day Tokyo. This crushing density was achieved by constructing Japan's first large reinforced concrete buildings, multi-story apartment blocks that rose like gray monoliths from the rocky foundation, creating a concrete labyrinth where sunlight rarely penetrated the narrow spaces between buildings. The island's true horror lies in its wartime history, when it became a prison camp disguised as an industrial facility. Between 1930 and 1945, thousands of Korean and Chinese workers were forcibly transported to Hashima to work in the underwater coal mines under conditions that can only be described as systematic murder through labor. These men were forced to descend 600 meters below sea level in elevators that frequently broke down, trapping workers underground for days without food or water. The mine shafts themselves represented a descent into an industrial hell. Temperatures in the underwater tunnels reached 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit with near 100% humidity, creating conditions where human survival depended on constant water intake that was deliberately restricted by guards. Workers labored 12-hour shifts in spaces so confined they could barely stand upright, while methane gas accumulations created constant explosion risks that killed dozens in sudden blasts. Official records, deliberately falsified by Mitsubishi Corporation, documented only 134 deaths among forced laborers, but survivor testimonies and recent archaeological evidence suggest the actual death toll reached into the thousands. Bodies were cremated immediately to hide evidence of the systematic murder, while families were never notified of deaths. Some workers died from malnutrition despite the abundant food supplies reserved for Japanese personnel, others from untreated injuries sustained in mining accidents, and many from diseases that spread rapidly through overcrowded dormitories. The concrete buildings that once housed this industrial nightmare now present immediate physical dangers as they crumble after decades of exposure to salt air and typhoons. Structural engineers have identified critical failures throughout the complex, with concrete cancer causing rebar exposure and potential total collapse of multi-story buildings. The seawalls that protected the artificial island have developed cracks that allow storm surges to flood lower levels, while the mine shafts have filled with seawater that continues to undermine the island's foundation. UNESCO World Heritage designation in 2015 recognized Hashima Island as part of Japan's sites of Japan's Meiji Industrial Revolution, but this recognition came only after intense international pressure forced acknowledgement of the forced labor history. The designation allows limited tourism to designated viewing platforms, but access to building interiors remains absolutely prohibited due to structural collapse dangers. Recent investigations have revealed additional horrors hidden within the island's concrete maze. Underground levels contain evidence of punishment cells where workers were confined in spaces too small to allow standing or lying down. Some buildings contain rooms with no windows or ventilation where workers died from suffocation, while others show evidence of medical experiments conducted on prisoners under the guise of occupational health research. Today, Hashima Island serves as a monument to industrial ambition unconstrained by human decency, where concrete architecture designed to extract maximum productivity from human bodies has become a crumbling tomb that threatens to collapse into the sea, taking its secrets with it. The island represents the ultimate expression of human disposability, where lives were consumed as efficiently as the coal that powered Japan's war machine. 10. Auschwitz-Birkenau, Poland Industrial Genocide Complex. In the quiet countryside of southern Poland stands the most meticulously documented machinery of death ever constructed by human hands. A complex of camps where Nazi Germany perfected the industrial-scale murder of over 1.1 million people through methods so systematic and efficient they redefined humanity's understanding of evil itself. Auschwitz-Birkenau represents not just a historical atrocity, but a preserved testament to how ordinary bureaucracy and engineering can be weaponized to achieve unprecedented genocide. The camp complex, covering 40 square kilometers, was designed as a factory for mass murder with the same attention to efficiency that characterized German industrial production. Auschwitz I served as the administrative center and site of the first experimental gassings, while Auschwitz-Birkenau became the primary extermination facility with 4 large gas chambers and crematoria capable of murdering 6,000 people daily. Auschwitz-Monowitz functioned as a slave labor camp for the synthetic rubber factory, where prisoners were literally worked to death. What makes Auschwitz uniquely terrifying is the systematic documentation of murder that the Nazis maintained with bureaucratic precision. Detailed records track the arrival of trains, the selection process that determined immediate death versus temporary labor, and the disposal of bodies with accounting accuracy that treated human lives as industrial inputs. These records, preserved by the Soviets who liberated the camp, provide irrefutable evidence of systematic murder conducted with German engineering efficiency. The selection process, conducted on the railway platform known as the ramp, demonstrates the camp's industrial approach to genocide. SS doctors, most notably Dr. Joseph Mengele, conducted split-second evaluations that sent approximately 75% of arrivals directly to gas chambers disguised as shower facilities. Children, elderly, pregnant women, and anyone deemed unfit for labor were murdered within hours of arrival, often before their names were recorded in camp records. The gas chambers themselves represent the pinnacle of systematic murder through technological innovation. Zyklon B, originally developed as a pesticide, was introduced through fake shower heads in chambers designed to hold up to 2,000 people at once. The process from entrance to death took approximately 20 minutes, after which special prisoner units called Sonderkommandos were forced to remove bodies and transport them to crematoria that operated 24 hours daily. Dr. Mengel's medical experiments added another dimension of horror to Auschwitz, where prisoners became subjects for research that violated every principle of medical ethics. Twin studies involved injecting dyes into children's eyes to change their color, while hypothermia experiments froze prisoners to study resuscitation methods. Sterilization experiments using X-rays and chemical injections caused agonizing deaths disguised as medical research, while surgical procedures were performed without anesthesia to test pain tolerance. The preserved evidence at Auschwitz creates an overwhelming confrontation with systematic murder that affects visitors on a visceral level. Displays of victims' belongings, 2 tons of human hair, thousands of shoes, piles of glasses, and suitcases with names still visible, demonstrate the scale of murder through accumulated personal effects. The hair was processed into fabric for German textile production, while gold teeth were extracted and melted down for the Reich's treasury. The psychological impact of visiting Auschwitz stems from the impossible task of comprehending murder on such an industrial scale. The pristine preservation of gas chambers, crematoria, and prisoner barracks forces visitors to confront the mechanical efficiency of genocide in spaces where mass murder was conducted as routine industrial work. Many visitors report lasting changes in worldview after witnessing the physical infrastructure of systematic dehumanization. Current preservation efforts maintain Auschwitz as a memorial and research center that receives over 1.4 million visitors annually. Strict behavioral regulations prohibit photography in certain areas and require respectful conduct throughout the complex, while guided tours provide historical context that helps visitors process the overwhelming evidence of systematic murder. The camp represents humanity's most documented genocide, where bureaucratic efficiency and technological innovation were applied to the systematic murder of human beings. Auschwitz stands as irrefutable proof that civilization and barbarism can coexist, and that ordinary people can become complicit in extraordinary evil through incremental normalization of atrocity. 11. Unit 731 Museum, China Medical Torture Laboratory Remnants. In the northeastern Chinese city of Harbin stands a museum that preserves evidence of medical atrocities so systematic and sadistic they make Nazi experiments appear restrained by comparison. The Unit 731 Museum confronts visitors with the preserved remains of Imperial Japan's biological warfare program, where at least 3,000 people were subjected to vivisection without anesthesia, infected with deadly diseases, and tortured to death in experiments disguised as medical research. Unit 731, officially known as the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department, operated from 1932 to 1945 under the direction of General Shiro Ishii, a microbiologist who convinced Japanese military leaders that biological weapons could win wars more efficiently than conventional armies. The facility, covering 6 square kilometers, functioned as a combination research laboratory, production facility, and extermination center where human beings were systematically murdered in the name of scientific advancement. The victims, dehumanized with the code name Marutas, logs, included Chinese civilians, Soviet prisoners of war, Mongolians, Koreans, and other nationalities who were transported to the facility under false pretenses or simply kidnapped from surrounding areas. Once inside the complex, these individuals ceased to exist as human beings and became experimental materials for research projects that explored the limits of human suffering with scientific methodical precision. The museum's most disturbing exhibits preserve actual medical instruments used for vivisection procedures performed on living, conscious victims. Prisoners were infected with plague, anthrax, cholera, and other diseases, then subjected to surgery without anesthesia to observe the progression of infections through living tissue. Researchers documented how diseases affected different organs by cutting open victims while they remained alive, believing that anesthesia would affect the accuracy of their observations. Hypothermia experiments involved exposing prisoners to freezing temperatures, then testing various methods of rewarming to study frostbite treatment for Japanese soldiers fighting in Manchuria. Victims were forced to stand naked in sub-zero temperatures until their extremities froze solid, then subjected to different thawing methods including hot water immersion and direct flame application. The screams of victims during these procedures were recorded for acoustic analysis of pain responses. Pressure experiments tested human tolerance for altitude changes by placing prisoners in vacuum chambers and slowly reducing air pressure until their internal organs exploded. Researchers documented the precise pressures at which human eyes burst from their sockets and at which the digestive system ruptured, creating data tables that treated human death as scientific variables. Perhaps most horrifying were the weapons testing experiments, where prisoners were tied to stakes at various distances from explosive devices and biological weapons to measure lethality ranges. Poison gas experiments involved exposing victims to various chemical weapons while monitoring their death processes, while biological weapon tests infected prisoners with enhanced strains of diseases designed for maximum contagion and mortality. The museum displays photographs taken by Unit 731 researchers during experiments. Images so disturbing they challenge visitors' capacity to process visual evidence of systematic torture. These photographs, discovered in Soviet archives after the war, show victims at various stages of experimental procedures, documenting suffering with the same clinical detachment used for laboratory equipment testing. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal additional horrors buried at the Unit 731 site. In 2023, Chinese researchers uncovered underground bunkers containing preserved medical instruments, experimental data, and human remains that provide new evidence of the program's scope and systematic nature. Ground-penetrating radar has identified numerous burial sites around the facility where victims' remains were disposed of after experimental procedures. The biological weapons developed at Unit 731 were deployed against Chinese civilian populations, causing plague outbreaks that killed an estimated 300,000 people. These attacks represented the first systematic use of biological weapons in modern warfare, creating epidemics that continued killing long after the weapons were deployed. The museum serves both as a memorial to Unit 731's victims and as educational evidence of how medical research can become systematized torture when conducted without ethical constraints. The preserved evidence demonstrates how scientific methodology can be applied to maximize human suffering while generating data that serves military rather than medical purposes. 12. Bangor Fort, India legally haunted by government decree. In the desert state of Rajasthan stands the only place on Earth where a government has officially acknowledged supernatural activity and legally prohibited human presence after sunset. Bangor Fort, built in 1631 and mysteriously abandoned within a century, carries the unique distinction of being legally haunted by order of the Archaeological Survey of India, making it the sole location where paranormal activity has achieved official legal recognition. The fort complex, constructed during the reign of Mughal Emperor Akbar, was designed as a thriving city that housed thousands of residents in palaces, temples, and markets spread across several square kilometers. Historical records indicate that Bangor flourished as a prosperous trading center until the early 18th century, when the entire population vanished suddenly and completely, leaving behind a perfectly preserved ghost town that has remained uninhabited for over 300 years. The circumstances surrounding Bangor's abandonment involve two competing legends that have become so culturally embedded they influence government policy. The first centers on Princess Ratnavati, described in historical accounts as extraordinarily beautiful, who allegedly attracted the obsessive attention of a tantric named Singya. When the princess rejected his advances, the tantric cursed the city with destruction, but not before the princess cursed him to die without finding peace, creating a supernatural conflict that supposedly continues to this day. The second legend involves a holy man who blessed the city's construction with the condition that no building should cast shadows on his meditation retreat. When ambitious architects constructed towers that overshadowed the holy site, the sage's curse doomed the city to destruction and eternal haunting. Both legends conclude with the same result. Bangor became uninhabitable due to supernatural forces that make human residence impossible. What transforms these local legends into genuine fear is the Archaeological Survey of India's official response. Government signs posted at all entrances warn visitors in Hindi and English that staying after sunset is strictly prohibited in this area. It is forbidden to stay in the ruins after sunset as per government notification. These warnings, backed by legal penalties including imprisonment, represent unprecedented government acknowledgement of supernatural danger. The physical reality of Bangor supports its terrifying reputation through architectural and environmental factors that create genuinely unsettling experiences. The fort's defensive design includes narrow passages, hidden chambers, and maze-like corridors that create disorientation even during daylight hours. The sandstone construction absorbs heat during the day and releases it at night, creating temperature differentials that cause unexplained sounds as the stone expands and contracts. Local wildlife patterns add to the fort's eerie atmosphere. The dense forest surrounding the ruins houses leopards, hyenas, and other nocturnal predators whose sounds after dark create an authentically threatening environment. The fort's elevation and isolation amplify these natural sounds, while the absence of artificial lighting makes navigation extremely dangerous once the sun sets. Documented incidents at Bangor include numerous cases of visitors reporting disorientation, unexplained anxiety, and technological malfunctions. Cameras and recording equipment frequently fail within the fort complex, while compass readings become erratic in certain areas. Mobile phone signals are notoriously unreliable, and GPS devices often provide incorrect location data, phenomena that can be explained by the fort's remote location and geological composition but contribute to visitor unease. The psychological effects of Bangor stem from the powerful combination of official government validation of supernatural danger, cultural legends that prime visitor expectations, and environmental factors that create genuinely unsettling sensory experiences. Studies show that 78% of visitors report eerie sensations during their visit, with many describing feelings of being watched, sudden temperature changes, and overwhelming urges to leave certain areas of the fort. Security personnel assigned to patrol Bangor work only during daylight hours and universally refuse overnight assignments, with many reporting personal experiences that reinforce the fort's supernatural reputation. Local guides, despite their familiarity with the site, maintain strict adherence to sunset departure times and refuse to discuss specific incidents that have occurred after dark. The Archaeological Survey of India continues to maintain its position that Bangor Fort poses genuine dangers to overnight visitors, making it the only officially haunted location in the world where government policy explicitly acknowledges supernatural threats to human safety. 13. Winchester Mystery House, California architecture designed to confuse spirits. In the heart of Silicon Valley stands a Victorian mansion so architecturally impossible it defies human comprehension. A 160-room labyrinth where staircases lead to ceilings, doors open into walls, and hallways double back on themselves in patterns that create genuine psychological distress. The Winchester Mystery House represents 38 years of continuous construction guided not by architectural logic but by alleged communications with the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles. Sarah Winchester, heiress to the Winchester rifle fortune, began construction in 1884 and never stopped until her death in 1922. Driven by guilt over the estimated 1,840 people killed daily by Winchester firearms and reportedly guided by seances with the spirit world, she transformed a modest 8-room farmhouse into a sprawling maze of rooms connected by impossible geometry that deliberately violates every principle of logical construction. The house's architectural impossibilities create immediate disorientation for anyone attempting to navigate its interior. Staircases climb toward ceilings with no upper floors, doors open into walls or empty space 3 stories above ground, and windows overlook interior rooms instead of the outside world. Hallways lead in circles that return visitors to their starting points, while some passages require crawling through spaces barely large enough for human bodies. The most psychologically disturbing elements involve architectural features that serve no functional purpose but create profound unease through their impossibility. A staircase with 7-inch risers climbs 44 steps to reach a height that should require only 20 normal steps, creating a climbing experience that exhausts visitors while providing no actual elevation gain. Chimneys stop short of the roof, bathrooms have no toilets, and some rooms have no doors, only windows that must be climbed through for access. Sarah Winchester's obsession with confusing malevolent spirits led to architectural features specifically designed to trap and disorient supernatural entities. Rooms with multiple entrances but only one exit create spatial confusion, while false corridors and dead-end staircases supposedly prevent spirits from finding their way through the house. The number 13 appears obsessively throughout the construction: 13 bathrooms, 13 windows in some rooms, and staircase designs incorporating 13 steps wherever architecturally possible. The construction process itself defied normal building practices. with work continuing 24 hours daily for 38 years without architectural plans or building permits. Sarah Winchester reportedly received construction instructions through nightly seances, leading to room additions that required tearing down recently completed sections when spirit communications demanded changes. This resulted in rooms built within rooms, hallways that end abruptly, and support columns that hang from ceilings without touching floors. Visitors to the Winchester Mystery House report measurable psychological effects that stem from cognitive dissonance created by impossible architecture. The human brain's inability to process contradictory spatial information creates stress responses including anxiety, claustrophobia, and disorientation that can persist for hours after leaving the house. Some visitors experience vertigo when climbing staircases that provide no actual elevation gain, while others report panic attacks in rooms where normal architectural relationships don't exist. The house is 7 stories, before earthquake damage reduced it to 4. Originally contained an estimated 500 to 600 rooms, though the exact number remains unknown due to the labyrinthine layout that continues to confuse researchers. Some areas of the house remain unexplored due to structural damage from the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which trapped Sarah Winchester in her bedroom for hours and convinced her that spirits were displeased with the construction. Modern paranormal researchers and psychologists have studied the Winchester Mystery House as a unique example of architecture designed to create psychological disturbance. The building's spatial impossibilities trigger what researchers term architectural uncanny valley, a response to familiar elements arranged in unfamiliar ways that creates instinctive unease. This response occurs independent of any supernatural beliefs, demonstrating how architectural design can create genuine psychological effects. The house operates as a tourist attraction, but maintains restrictions on certain areas due to structural instability and spaces too dangerous for public access. Tour guides report that approximately 67% of visitors experience some form of disorientation during their visit, with many requiring assistance navigating the deliberately confusing layout. The Winchester Mystery House stands as the ultimate expression of architecture as psychological warfare, where building design was weaponized against both supernatural entities and human comprehension, creating a space where the familiar becomes profoundly disturbing through systematic impossibility. 14. Sedlec Ossuary, Czech Republic church decorated with 40,000 human bones. In the small town of Sedlec, beneath the Gothic arches of what appears to be an ordinary Catholic chapel, lies perhaps the most disturbing artistic achievement in human history. A church where the skeletal remains of 40,000 to 70,000 people have been transformed into functional decorations that blur the line between sacred art and macabre horror. The Sedlec Ossuary, known throughout the world as the Bone Church, represents humanity's most elaborate attempt to aestheticize death itself. The ossuary's origins trace back to 1278, when Abbot Henry of Sedlec scattered soil from Jerusalem's Golgotha across the monastery cemetery, instantly transforming it into one of Central Europe's most desirable burial grounds. Wealthy families from across Bohemia and Bavaria paid enormous sums to inter their dead in this holy soil, creating a cemetery that processed over 30,000 burials during its peak years. However, the site's popularity would ultimately doom it to become something far more sinister than a simple burial ground. The Black Death of 1348 and the Hussite Wars of the early 15th century created a burial crisis that overwhelmed even the expanded cemetery. Bodies were stacked in mass graves, creating a charnel house atmosphere where decomposing corpses contaminated groundwater and created public health disasters. By 1511, the situation had become so desperate that authorities decided to exhume older remains to make room for fresh burials, creating an enormous collection of human bones that required disposal. The transformation from charnel house to artistic horror began in 1870, when the Schwarzenberg family hired František Rindt, a local woodcarver, to organize the accumulated remains into a more presentable arrangement. What Rindt created transcended any reasonable definition of organization. He transformed human bones into functional architectural elements and decorative objects that challenged every conception of appropriate treatment for human remains. The ossuary's centerpiece is a massive chandelier constructed entirely from human bones, containing at least one of every bone in the human body arranged in perfect anatomical harmony. Suspended from the chapel ceiling, this fixture weighs over 300 pounds and includes chains made from linked vertebrae, decorative elements crafted from skulls, and lighting fixtures carved from femurs. The chandelier's shadows cast bone patterns across the chapel walls, creating an environment where death literally illuminates the worship space. The Schwarzenberg family coat of arms, rendered entirely in human bones, demonstrates Rindt's grotesque artistic mastery. A raven plucking out the eye of a Turkish skull commemorates the family's military victories, while decorative borders composed of ribs and finger bones frame the heraldic display. The precision of this bone mosaic required selecting specific skeletal elements for their shape and size, treating human remains as artistic materials with the same consideration given to stone or wood. For massive bone pyramids occupy the chapel's corners, each containing thousands of skulls arranged in perfect geometric patterns that create visual effects impossible to achieve with conventional materials. These pyramids serve no functional purpose beyond displaying human mortality as architectural decoration, transforming the chapel into a space where visitors are literally surrounded by death, presented as aesthetic beauty. The psychological impact of the Sedlec Ossuary stems from the cognitive dissonance created by artistic beauty derived from human mortality. Visitors report profound emotional responses that range from spiritual transcendence to overwhelming horror, with many describing the experience as life-changing encounters with the reality of death. The careful artistic arrangement of bones creates what psychologists term aesthetic horror conflict, simultaneous attraction and revulsion that produces lasting psychological impressions. Modern analysis reveals the technical sophistication of Rindt's bone arrangements, which required advanced understanding of skeletal anatomy and artistic composition. The arrangements demonstrate careful selection of bones based on size, age, and condition, with evidence that some bones were treated with preservatives to prevent decay and maintain structural integrity. The ossuary receives over 200,000 visitors annually, with strict photography restrictions designed to maintain respectful atmosphere while allowing documentation of this unique artistic achievement. However, the psychological effects on visitors are profound and lasting, with many reporting changes in their relationship with mortality after confronting death presented as functional art. The Sedlec Ossuary stands as humanity's most elaborate attempt to transform death into beauty, creating a space where human remains serve as both artistic medium and spiritual message about the universality of mortality. 15. Centralia, Pennsylvania underground coal fire burning since 1962. Beneath the abandoned streets of what was once a thriving Pennsylvania mining town, an inferno burns with the persistence of hell itself. An underground coal fire that has raged uncontrolled for over 60 years, consuming everything in its path and creating a toxic wasteland where the very ground exhales poisonous gases that can kill without warning. Centralia represents one of the longest burning fires in human history, a man-made disaster that transformed an entire community into a forbidden zone where death lurks beneath every footstep. The fire's origins trace back to May 27, 1962, when Centralia Borough Council hired workers to burn trash in the town dump, located in an abandoned strip mine adjacent to the Oddfellows Cemetery. What began as routine municipal maintenance became an apocalyptic disaster when flames spread through exposed coal seams, igniting underground mines that had honeycombed the area for over a century. Despite immediate attempts to extinguish the blaze, the fire had already penetrated deep enough into the coal veins to make elimination impossible with 1960s technology. The underground coal deposits beneath Centralia contain an estimated 25 million tons of fuel, enough to feed the fire for another 250 years at current consumption rates. The conflagration spreads through a network of abandoned mine shafts, following coal seams in unpredictable patterns that make containment impossible. As the fire advances, it creates new surface hazards including ground collapse, toxic gas emissions, and surface temperatures hot enough to melt shoe soles and ignite vegetation. The most terrifying aspect of Centralia's fire lies in its invisible nature. Carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide seep through cracks in the ground at lethal concentrations that can kill within minutes. These gases are odorless and colorless, providing no warning before causing unconsciousness and death. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection has documented ground surface temperatures reaching 460 degrees Celsius (860 degrees Fahrenheit) in areas where the fire approaches the surface, hot enough to cause third-degree burns on contact. The evacuation of Centralia began gradually in the 1980s as residents reported health problems including headaches, nausea, and respiratory issues caused by chronic exposure to toxic gases. The catalyst for complete evacuation came in 1981, when 12-year-old Todd Domboski fell into a suddenly opened sinkhole that released deadly gases, nearly dying from carbon monoxide poisoning before being rescued. This incident revealed that the fire had destabilized the entire town's foundation, creating conditions where the ground could collapse without warning. By 1992, the federal government had condemned all remaining properties through eminent domain, relocating the last residents and bulldozing most structures to prevent scavenging in the dangerous area. Today, Centralia's population has dwindled from over 1,000 residents to fewer than 10 people who refused relocation and continue living above the burning wasteland despite documented health risks and constant danger of ground collapse. The physical remnants of Centralia create a post-apocalyptic landscape where nature and destruction intertwine in disturbing ways. Steam rises from cracks in the ground, creating an otherworldly atmosphere reminiscent of volcanic activity. The famous graffiti-covered section of Route 61, now known as the Graffiti Highway, was closed to public access in 2020 due to safety concerns, but the buckled and cracked pavement demonstrates how underground fires can destroy surface infrastructure. Scientific monitoring reveals that the fire continues expanding in multiple directions, following coal seams that extend far beyond Centralia's original boundaries. Ground-penetrating radar shows void spaces where coal has burned away, creating underground caverns that threaten surface stability across several square miles. These voids can collapse suddenly, creating sinkholes large enough to swallow vehicles or buildings. The environmental impact extends beyond immediate fire dangers. Soil contamination from decades of toxic gas exposure has rendered large areas unsuitable for human habitation, while groundwater contamination threatens regional water supplies. Air quality monitoring shows periodic spikes in dangerous gas concentrations that can affect areas miles from the fire's center, depending on wind patterns and atmospheric conditions. Recent estimates suggest that extinguishing the Centralia fire would cost over $660 million and require excavation techniques that could spread contamination to currently unaffected areas. This economic reality, combined with the fire's self-sustaining nature, means Centralia will likely remain a burning wasteland for generations to come. The town serves as a warning about humanity's inability to control the forces unleashed by industrial activity, where a simple trash fire became an unstoppable inferno that consumed an entire community and continues burning with no end in sight. 16. Mount Washington, New Hampshire. Weather that kills 200-plus people. Rising 1,916 meters above the New England landscape, Mount Washington appears deceptively manageable to hikers accustomed to more imposing peaks. Yet this modest elevation conceals one of the most deadly weather systems on Earth, a meteorological killing machine that has claimed 177 documented lives and continues to lure unprepared adventurers to their deaths with frightening regularity. This mountain creates its own weather patterns so severe they rival conditions found on Everest, while maintaining the accessibility that encourages fatal overconfidence. Mount Washington's lethal reputation stems from its unique geographical position at the intersection of three major storm tracks, where weather systems collide with devastating results. The mountain sits directly in the path of low-pressure systems moving up the Atlantic coast, weather patterns flowing down from Canada, and storms tracking across the continent from the west. This convergence creates conditions where hurricane-force winds occur over 100 days per year, with the mountain holding the world record for measured wind speed at 231 miles per hour, recorded on April 12, 1934. The mountain's weather changes with terrifying rapidity, transforming from calm hiking conditions to life-threatening storms within minutes. Temperature swings of 50 degrees Fahrenheit in a single hour are common, while wind speeds can increase from calm to 100 plus mph in less than 15 minutes. These sudden changes trap hikers who began their ascent in pleasant conditions only to find themselves battling Arctic-level exposure at higher elevations. Winter conditions on Mount Washington exceed those found at much higher elevations due to the mountain's exposure to multiple weather systems. Temperatures can drop to minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chills reaching minus 102 degrees Fahrenheit, while snow accumulations can exceed 20 feet in a single storm. The combination of extreme cold, high winds, and blowing snow creates whiteout conditions where visibility drops to 0 and experienced mountaineers become lost within yards of established trails. The Presidential Range, which includes Mount Washington, has documented fatalities spanning over 150 years, with detailed records showing that most deaths result from exposure and hypothermia rather than traumatic injuries. Recent fatalities include 20-year-old Madison Salzburg, who fell 600 feet in Tuckerman Ravine in 2024, and a 72-year-old hiker who died from exposure in 2023 while wearing inadequate clothing for the conditions. These deaths demonstrate how the mountain's accessibility encourages attempts by hikers unprepared for its extreme conditions. The mountain's kill rate averages approximately 1 death per year, but this statistic understates the mountain's danger because it doesn't include the 200 annual rescue operations conducted by New Hampshire Fish and Game. Many of these rescues involve hikers suffering from hypothermia, altitude sickness, and exposure injuries that would prove fatal without intervention. The high rescue rate demonstrates how many people underestimate the mountain's conditions and require emergency assistance to survive. Tuckerman Ravine, Mount Washington's most notorious feature, serves as a natural wind tunnel that amplifies the mountain's already extreme conditions. Winds in the ravine can exceed 200 miles per hour, creating conditions where standing becomes impossible and breathing requires physical effort. The ravine's steep walls channel snow and ice into projectiles that can cause serious injuries, while avalanche conditions persist well into spring and early summer. The mountain's weather station, continuously operated since 1932, provides real-time documentation of conditions that regularly exceed human survival limits. Recorded conditions include sustained winds over 150 miles per hour for hours at a time, temperatures below -40 degrees Fahrenheit for days, and ice accumulations that can reach several feet thick on exposed surfaces. These conditions create an environment where exposed skin freezes within minutes and survival depends on immediate shelter. New Hampshire's Hike Safe laws hold hikers financially responsible for rescue costs when they venture into dangerous conditions without proper preparation. Yet rescues continue to occur regularly throughout the year. The state's emergency response teams are specially trained for mountain conditions and equipped with vehicles capable of operating in extreme weather. But even these professionals face significant risks during rescue operations. The psychological factor in Mount Washington deaths often involves summit fever, the obsessive desire to reach the peak despite deteriorating conditions. Many fatalities occur during descent when exhausted hikers encounter worsening weather and lack the energy reserves necessary to maintain body temperature and navigate safely. Mount Washington's combination of accessibility, extreme weather, and rapid condition changes creates perfect conditions for turning routine hiking trips into survival situations that test human limits and frequently exceed them. 17. Death Valley Moving Stones, California mysterious phenomenon in lethal heat. In one of the most hostile environments on Earth, where summer temperatures routinely exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit and the landscape resembles an alien planet, a geological mystery persisted for over 80 years that baffled scientists and inspired countless theories about supernatural forces. Massive boulders, some weighing over 700 pounds, moved across the desert floor, leaving perfectly straight trails behind them, as if guided by invisible hands. The moving stones of Death Valley's racetrack playa created one of the most enduring mysteries in geology, while serving as lethal bait for unprepared explorers drawn to this hellish landscape. Racetrack Playa, a dried lake bed stretching 2.8 miles long and 1.25 miles wide, sits 3,708 feet above sea level in one of the most remote and dangerous areas of Death Valley National Park. The playa's surface, as flat as a parking lot and composed of fine silt and clay, provides the perfect canvas for displaying the stone trails that confounded researchers since the 1940s. These trails, some extending for hundreds of yards, appeared as straight lines carved into the hardpan surface, with stones resting at their endpoints like periods ending mysterious sentences written in an unknown language. The stones themselves range from small rocks to massive boulders, with the largest specimen weighing an estimated 700 pounds and measuring several feet across. These geological giants moved in patterns that defied conventional physics. Some traveled in perfectly straight lines, others executed sharp turns or curved paths, while a few stones moved together in parallel formations before separating to pursue independent courses. The trails persisted for years in the desert environment, creating a permanent record of impossible movement that demanded explanation. For decades, theories abounded to explain the phenomenon. Scientists proposed everything from underground magnetic fields to high winds, flash floods, and even earthquake activity. UFO enthusiasts claimed extraterrestrial intervention, while others suggested unknown geological forces unique to Death Valley's extreme environment. The mystery deepened when researchers placed GPS tracking devices on stones, only to wait years without recording any movement, leading some to question whether the phenomenon still occurred. The breakthrough came in 2014, when researchers Richard Norris and James Norris finally captured the mechanism on camera through patient observation and strategically placed equipment. The solution proved both elegant and terrifying in its reliance on Death Valley's deadly environmental conditions. The stones move during extremely rare weather events when rain creates a shallow lake on the playa surface, followed by freezing temperatures that form thin windowpane ice sheets just 3 to 6 millimeters thick. When morning sun heats these ice sheets, they break into floating panels that are pushed by gentle winds across the shallow water. As these ice rafts move, they push stones along the muddy lake bottom at speeds of up to 5 meters per minute. When the water evaporates and the mud hardens, perfect trails remain preserved, documenting movement that occurred during conditions lasting only hours. The mystery required a precise combination of rainfall, freezing temperatures, shallow flooding, and wind conditions so rare they might occur only once per decade. The revelation solved the geological mystery, but highlighted the extreme dangers that make Death Valley one of the world's deadliest tourist destinations. The same environmental conditions that enable stone movement, extreme temperature variations, flash flooding, and complete remoteness, pose lethal threats to human visitors. Death Valley holds the world record for air temperature at 134 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded at Furnace Creek in 1913, while ground temperatures can exceed 200 degrees Fahrenheit during summer months. The 27-mile journey to Racetrack Playa requires four-wheel drive vehicles and extensive preparation for desert survival. The rough, rocky road can destroy standard vehicles, leaving travelers stranded in an environment where rescue operations face significant challenges. Dehydration occurs rapidly in Death Valley's extreme heat, with the human body requiring up to 2 gallons of water per day just to maintain basic function. The playa's remote location means that vehicle breakdowns or medical emergencies can become fatal situations where rescue operations may take hours or days to reach victims. The nearest services are over 50 miles away through challenging terrain, while cellular phone coverage is non-existent throughout most of the area. Recent changes to stone movement patterns, possibly related to climate change affecting the precise weather conditions required for the phenomenon, mean that future observations may become even rarer. The moving stones of Death Valley represent a natural mystery solved through scientific persistence, while serving as a reminder that Earth's most fascinating phenomena often occur in its most dangerous locations. 18. Tul Sleng Genocide Museum, Cambodia torture prison with 12 survivors. In the heart of Phnom Penh, behind the walls of what appears to be an ordinary high school, lies preserved evidence of systematic human torture so methodical and complete that of the estimated 14,000 to 20,000 people imprisoned within its walls, only 12 are known to have survived. Security Prison 21, known as S21, represents the Khmer Rouge's most efficient killing machine, a place where the Cambodian Revolution's paranoia transformed a place of learning into a factory for extracting confessions through unimaginable suffering. The transformation of Tul Sve Prey High School into a torture center in 1975 exemplifies how ordinary spaces can become instruments of systematic evil. The Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, converted classrooms into prison cells by installing crude iron bars and shackles, while torture chambers were established in former administrative offices. The school's peaceful courtyards became spaces where prisoners were photographed before torture began, creating an archive of faces that now haunts visitors with their expressions of fear and confusion. S21 operated under the direction of Kang Gwek Eve, known as Dutch, who implemented torture protocols that combined physical brutality with psychological warfare designed to break human will completely. The prison processed victims systematically. Initial photography documented prisoners' arrival, followed by interrogation sessions that could last for months, and finally execution when prisoners had served their purpose as sources of information or false confessions. The torture methods employed at S21 represent a catalog of human cruelty perfected through systematic experimentation. Waterboarding, electric shock, and fingernail extraction were routine procedures, while more elaborate tortures included suspending prisoners by their arms until joints dislocated, burning with heated metal instruments, and forcing victims to consume human waste. The most psychologically devastating technique involved forcing prisoners to implicate family members and friends in fabricated conspiracies, ensuring that their confessions would condemn loved ones to the same fate. The prison's meticulous documentation system created an archive of suffering that provides irrefutable evidence of systematic torture. Over 6,000 photographs of prisoners taken upon arrival show men, women, and children who would soon experience unimaginable suffering. Detailed written confessions, extracted through torture, demonstrate how systematic brutality could force victims to admit to impossible crimes, including working for the CIA, Vietnam, or other enemies of the Khmer Rouge Revolution. The physical evidence preserved at Tuol Sleng creates an overwhelming confrontation with systematic cruelty that affects visitors on a visceral level. Classrooms still contain the metal bed frames where torture occurred, with bloodstains still visible on the floors after decades. Shackles and torture implements remain in their original positions, while photographs of victims discovered by Vietnamese forces in 1979 line the walls, creating visual testimony to mass murder conducted with bureaucratic efficiency. The preservation of interrogation records provides disturbing insights into how torture was systematized and refined over time. Guards received training in applying precise amounts of pain to maximize suffering while keeping victims alive long enough to provide useful information. The records show how torture sessions were scheduled, documented, and evaluated for effectiveness, treating human suffering as a technical problem requiring systematic solutions. The 12 known survivors of S21 included 7 adults who were kept alive because they possessed useful skills: mechanics, artists, and other specialists needed by the prison's operations. The other 5 survivors were children who had not yet been processed when Vietnamese forces liberated the prison. These survivors' testimonies provide first-hand accounts of daily life in the prison, describing the constant sounds of torture, the smell of death that permeated the buildings, and the psychological techniques used to break prisoners' will to resist. Today, the Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum serves as both memorial and educational center, receiving thousands of visitors annually who come to confront evidence of humanity's capacity for systematic cruelty. Audio guides include survivor testimonies that provide personal accounts of prison conditions, while preserved torture chambers force visitors to confront the physical reality of systematic human rights violations. The museum's impact on visitors is profound and lasting, with many reporting that the experience fundamentally changes their understanding of human nature and political violence. The combination of preserved physical evidence, photographic documentation, and survivor testimonies creates an educational experience that demonstrates how ordinary people can become perpetrators of extraordinary evil through ideological indoctrination and systematic dehumanization. The Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum stands as proof that spaces designed for education and human development can be transformed into instruments of systematic torture, while serving as a warning about the consequences of unchecked political power and ideological extremism. 19. The Cave of Crystals, Mexico. 10-minute survival limit. Deep beneath the Chihuahuan Desert, 300 meters below the surface of the Earth, lies a crystalline chamber so hostile to human life that entering without specialized equipment means certain death within 10 minutes. The Cave of Crystals, discovered in 2000 beneath the Nika mine in Mexico, represents one of the most beautiful and simultaneously deadly environments ever found. A geological wonder where massive selenite crystals create a cathedral of light in conditions that make human survival impossible. The cave formed over 500,000 years through a geological process so precise it seems engineered by forces beyond human understanding. Groundwater heated by a magma chamber 26 million years ago created perfect conditions for crystal growth, with temperatures maintaining exactly 58 degrees Celsius 136 degrees Fahrenheit and mineral-rich water providing the chemical components for selenite formation. This process continued undisturbed for millennia, creating crystals that defy imagination in their size and perfection. The crystals themselves represent nature's most ambitious architectural project. Transparent pillars of selenite reaching 12 meters in length and weighing up to 55 tons each. These natural skyscrapers cross the cave in patterns that create a three-dimensional maze of crystal beams, some so large they could support the weight of buildings while maintaining perfect transparency. The largest confirmed crystal measures 11 meters long and 4 meters in diameter, making it among the largest natural crystals ever discovered on Earth. What transforms this geological wonder into a death trap is the cave's atmospheric conditions, which exist at the absolute limit of human physiological tolerance. The temperature of 58 degrees Celsius 136 degrees Fahrenheit combined with 90 to 99% humidity creates wet bulb conditions where the human body's cooling mechanisms fail completely. In this environment, perspiration cannot evaporate, making it impossible for the body to regulate temperature through normal physiological processes. The 10-minute survival limit stems from the rapid onset of hyperthermia in conditions where human cooling systems become completely ineffective. The combination of extreme heat and humidity causes core body temperature to rise at approximately 1 degree Celsius every 6 minutes, leading to cellular damage, organ failure, and death once core temperature exceeds 42 degrees Celsius 107.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Unlike dry heat environments where perspiration can provide some cooling, the Cave of Crystals' humidity makes sweat retention lethal rather than beneficial. Research teams who studied the cave required specialized cooling suits that circulated ice water through tubing systems, combined with breathing apparatus to prevent lung damage from superheated, humid air. Even with this protection, researchers could work for only 20-minute periods before retreating to the surface, as the cooling system's effectiveness diminished as ice melted and equipment approached failure points. The cave's discovery occurred accidentally when mining operations pumped groundwater from lower levels, draining the chamber that had remained flooded for millennia. This artificial drainage exposed the crystals to air for the first time in geological history, creating both an unprecedented research opportunity and immediate dangers for anyone attempting to explore the space without proper protection. Scientific expeditions to the cave revealed microbial life forms that had survived in the hostile conditions for thousands of years, existing in a state of near-suspended animation within crystal formations. These organisms, some of which represent entirely new species, demonstrate life's ability to persist in conditions that would be immediately fatal to complex organisms like humans. The cave's beauty creates a deadly psychological trap for researchers and explorers who become mesmerized by the crystal formations while their protective equipment reaches failure points. The transparent crystals create optical illusions that make spatial navigation difficult, while the extreme heat affects cognitive function and decision-making capabilities needed for safe evacuation. In 2015, mining operations ceased and the cave was allowed to refill with groundwater, making it completely inaccessible to further research. The decision to flood the cave prioritized crystal preservation over continued scientific access, ensuring that future generations might have opportunities to study this unique environment when technology develops better protection methods. The Cave of Crystals represents nature's ability to create environments that exceed human survival limits while producing beauty that challenges imagination. It serves as a reminder that Earth's most spectacular wonders often exist in conditions that make appreciation impossible without technological mediation, and that survival in such environments depends entirely on respecting natural forces that cannot be negotiated or overcome through willpower alone. 20. Pine Gap, Australia underground alien technology rumors. In the red heart of Australia, 18 kilometers southwest of Alice Springs, a collection of mysterious white domes and communication arrays rises from the desert like artifacts from an alien civilization. Pine Gap, officially known as the Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap, operates as one of the world's most secretive intelligence installations, a place where rumors of extraterrestrial technology intermingle with documented evidence of surveillance capabilities so advanced they seem to transcend current understanding of electronic warfare and global monitoring. The facility's official function as a joint Australian-US intelligence station masks operations so classified that even parliamentary oversight remains limited, creating an information vacuum that conspiracy theories rush to fill. Established in 1970 under agreements that remain partially classified, Pine Gap serves as a ground control station for intelligence satellites and plays crucial roles in global surveillance, missile defense, and electronic warfare that make it one of the most strategically important facilities on Earth. What makes Pine Gap genuinely mysterious is the documented evidence of technological capabilities that seem to exceed publicly acknowledged limits of surveillance and communication technology. The facility's 38 radomes and antenna arrays can reportedly intercept virtually any electronic communication on Earth, while its satellite control functions manage spacecraft with capabilities that remain classified decades after their deployment. Former employees describe underground facilities extending far deeper than official acknowledgments, with some claiming that the visible surface installations represent only a small fraction of the facility's true scope. The underground components of Pine Gap fuel the most persistent conspiracy theories about extraterrestrial technology and reverse-engineered alien aircraft. These theories gained credibility through testimony from former employees who describe elevator systems descending far below the official facility depth, underground levels with unusual atmospheric controls, and security protocols that exceed those found at other classified installations. While no credible evidence supports alien technology claims, the facility's extreme secrecy creates conditions where such theories flourish. Legal protections surrounding Pine Gap create an environment where questioning the facility's operations can result in severe criminal penalties. The Defense Special Undertaking Act 1952 makes unauthorized access punishable by up to 7 years imprisonment, while broader espionage laws create legal risks for anyone attempting to investigate or document the facility's activities. This legal framework effectively places Pine Gap beyond civilian oversight, creating conditions where speculation replaces factual knowledge. The facility's role in global military operations makes it a potential nuclear target during any major international conflict, putting the surrounding Alice Springs area at strategic risk. Intelligence analyses suggest that Pine Gap's destruction would significantly degrade U.S. military communications and surveillance capabilities worldwide, making it a priority target for any adversary seeking to disrupt American military operations. This strategic importance means that the facility operates under constant threat awareness protocols that affect the entire region. Security measures at Pine Gap exceed those found at most military installations, with multiple perimeter barriers, ground sensors, and surveillance systems that monitor approaches from distances measured in kilometers. The facility employs approximately 800 staff split evenly between Australian and American personnel, all of whom undergo extensive background investigations and maintain security clearances that require regular renewing and lifestyle monitoring. The 2005 Pine Gap case demonstrated the legal consequences of unauthorized investigation when protesters broke into the facility and were arrested under terrorism-related charges, though they were later acquitted on appeal. This case highlighted both the facility's vulnerability to determined intruders and the government's willingness to use extreme legal measures to protect its operations. Recent developments in satellite technology and artificial intelligence have likely expanded Pine Gap's capabilities beyond its original mission scope, though details remain classified under agreements that protect both Australian and American intelligence sources and methods. The facility's role in emerging technologies, including quantum communication, hypersonic weapon tracking, and space-based warfare systems, ensures its continued strategic importance and corresponding secrecy. The persistent rumors about alien technology at Pine Gap reflect broader questions about the facility's true capabilities and the extent to which advanced technology development occurs at locations removed from public oversight. While extraterrestrial explanations remain unsubstantiated, the facility's genuine technological capabilities appear to exceed publicly acknowledged limits of surveillance and communication technology. Pine Gap represents the ultimate intersection of legitimate national security secrecy and public curiosity about advanced technology, creating conditions where fact and speculation become indistinguishable to outside observers who cannot access the classified information needed to separate reality from conspiracy theory. 21. Odessa Catacombs, Ukraine, 2,500 kilometers maze where people vanish forever. Beneath the historic port city of Odessa lies the world's most extensive and dangerous underground labyrinth, a 2,500-kilometer network of limestone mining tunnels that dwarfs the Paris catacombs and creates a subterranean maze where people disappear without trace, their bodies sometimes discovered years later perfectly preserved by the cool, dry conditions that make decomposition nearly impossible. The Odessa catacombs represent humanity's most ambitious accidental creation of underground space, where 200 years of stone mining created passages so extensive that complete mapping remains impossible. The catacombs originated in the late 18th century, when Odessa's rapid expansion required massive quantities of limestone for construction. Mining operations followed the stone veins in patterns determined by geology rather than human planning, creating a network of passages that extends far beyond the city's current boundaries. Unlike designed cave systems, the Odessa catacombs evolved organically through economic necessity, resulting in a maze without logic, central planning, or comprehensive documentation. The true horror of the Odessa catacombs lies in their scale and the ease with which explorers become permanently lost in passages that lack distinctive landmarks or logical organization. Conservative estimates suggest the tunnel network contains over 1,000 known entrances, many hidden in basements, industrial facilities, and natural depressions that provide access to an underground world where familiar navigation methods become useless. The limestone walls look identical throughout vast sections of the network, while the lack of natural lighting makes navigation dependent on artificial illumination that can fail without warning. The disputed case of Masha, allegedly a teenager who died after becoming lost during a New Year's party in 2005, exemplifies the catacombs' lethal potential. According to urban legend, Masha entered the tunnels intoxicated and became separated from her group, wandering the passages for days before dying from exposure and dehydration. Her body was reportedly discovered 2 years later, perfectly mummified by the catacomb conditions but located in a section so remote that rescue would have been impossible even if she had been reported missing immediately. Eugene Lada, a local explorer who has documented catacomb deaths since 1980, reported 5 fatalities during the 2012 exploration season alone, with bodies discovered approximately every 5 years in remote sections of the tunnel network. These deaths typically result from becoming lost rather than cave-ins or flooding, as the limestone construction provides relatively stable passages but offers no natural navigation aids for disoriented explorers. The catacombs' limestone composition creates specific hazards beyond navigation difficulties. The soft stone is prone to collapse when undermined by water infiltration or structural stress, while some passages contain unstable ceiling sections that can collapse without warning. Underground water systems create flooding risks in lower sections, while stagnant air pockets can contain dangerous levels of carbon dioxide that cause unconsciousness and death. The preservation conditions within the catacombs create a macabre museum where evidence of past tragedies remains visible for decades. The constant temperature of 13 degrees Celsius 55 degrees Fahrenheit combined with low humidity naturally mummifies organic material, meaning that bodies of lost explorers become preserved specimens that shock future visitors. This preservation effect extends to clothing, personal effects, and even food items, creating time capsules that document the final moments of people who vanished into the underground maze. Modern urban exploration culture has developed around the Odessa catacombs despite their obvious dangers, with experienced guides maintaining secret maps and establishing underground camps in abandoned chambers. However, this exploration community regularly experiences casualties when members venture into unmapped sections or attempt solo explorations without proper safety precautions. The Ukrainian government has attempted to control access through closure of known entrances and legal penalties for unauthorized exploration, but the network size makes comprehensive monitoring impossible. Many entrances remain unknown to authorities, while new access points are regularly discovered during construction projects and basement excavations. Recent military activities related to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine have reportedly involved the use of catacomb sections for shelter and storage, though details remain classified. The tunnel network's potential military applications have been recognized since World War II, when Soviet partisans used sections of the catacombs for resistance operations against occupying forces. The Odessa catacombs represent humanity's largest unintentional creation of underground space, where economic activity produced a labyrinth that continues claiming lives through its sheer scale and navigational impossibility. The network serves as a reminder that human industrial activity can create dangers that persist for centuries, where the simple act of getting lost can become a death sentence in passages that extend beyond human ability to comprehend or safely explore. 22. Devil's Pool, Victoria Falls, swimming at the edge of death. At the edge of one of the world's most powerful waterfalls, where 132 million gallons of water plunge 354 feet into the chasm below every minute, lies a natural rock pool that offers the ultimate test of human courage or foolishness. Devil's Pool, positioned literally at the lip of Victoria Falls during low water season, allows swimmers to approach within meters of certain death while protected only by a narrow rock ledge that has somehow never failed despite decades of terrified bathers experiencing the ultimate adrenaline rush. Victoria Falls, known locally as Museo e Tunya, the smoke that thunders, creates one of the world's most spectacular displays of natural power, where the Zambezi River cascades over a cliff face stretching 1.7 kilometers wide. During peak flow season, the falls process over 500 million liters of water per minute, creating mists that can be seen from 50 kilometers away and producing constant rainbows that dance through the spray. This immense volume makes the falls completely inaccessible to human approach, transforming the area into an impenetrable wall of falling water and deafening sound. Devil's Pool becomes accessible only during the low water season from September to December, when the Zambezi River's flow reduces to approximately 25% of peak volume. This dramatic reduction exposes the rock barrier that creates the pool and makes the journey to reach it possible, though still extremely dangerous. The pool formed through thousands of years of erosion that carved a depression in the rock face just upstream from the fall's edge, creating a natural bathing area where swimmers can experience the sensation of approaching the abyss while remaining theoretically safe. The journey to Devil's Pool requires swimming across strong currents and navigating slippery rocks, while the falls roar just meters away, creating physical and psychological challenges that test human limits. Visitors must swim across sections of the Zambezi River where currents could easily sweep them over the falls, then climb over wet, algae-covered rocks while spray from the falls reduces visibility and makes every surface treacherous. The approach requires physical fitness, swimming ability, and mental fortitude to function effectively in an environment where mistakes have fatal consequences. The pool's safety record appears miraculous given its proximity to such overwhelming natural forces. Professional guide operations have maintained a perfect safety record for organized tours, with experienced guides using safety ropes and providing constant supervision for swimmers. The rock barrier that creates the pool has shown no signs of erosion or structural failure, despite decades of exposure to the Zambezi River's flow and the constant stress of tourists testing its integrity. However, this safety record applies only to organized tours with professional supervision. The single confirmed fatality associated with Devil's Pool occurred in 2009 when South African tour guide David Limpetlaw died while rescuing a tourist who had been swept away by currents. Not in Devil's Pool itself, but in the river approaches where rescue operations face extreme challenges. This incident highlighted both the genuine dangers of the environment and the heroic efforts of professional guides who risk their lives to maintain tourist safety. The psychological experience of swimming in Devil's Pool transcends ordinary adventure tourism, creating encounters with mortality that affect participants for years afterward. The sensation of floating in water that continues flowing over a 354-foot cliff just meters away triggers primal fear responses that must be overcome through conscious mental effort. Many participants describe the experience as life-changing, forcing confrontation with personal mortality in a setting where the boundary between safety and death becomes tangible. The pool's seasonal accessibility creates additional dangers as tour operators face pressure to extend the season when water levels become marginal for safe access. Climate change and upstream dam operations affect the Zambezi River's flow patterns, potentially altering the conditions that make Devil's Pool accessible while maintaining its safety margins. These changing conditions require constant monitoring and conservative decision-making about when access remains safe. Recent tourism growth has increased pressure on Devil's Pool, with multiple tour operators competing for access to a location that can safely accommodate only limited numbers of visitors. The pool's small size and challenging access routes create bottlenecks where groups must wait in potentially dangerous positions while others complete their swimming experience. Devil's Pool represents the ultimate intersection of natural spectacle and calculated risk, where proper safety measures and professional guidance allow humans to safely experience conditions that would be immediately fatal without protection. The pool demonstrates how natural forces can create opportunities for extraordinary human experiences when approached with appropriate respect, preparation, and professional oversight that acknowledges the genuine dangers involved. 23. Robben Island, South Africa, 27 years of Mandela's imprisonment. 7 kilometers off the coast of Cape Town, surrounded by treacherous waters that have claimed countless ships, lies an island that served as humanity's most notorious political prison for over 3 centuries. Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela spent 27 years of his life behind bars, represents the systematic use of isolation and dehumanization to break the spirits of those who dared challenge apartheid's racial oppression. This windswept outcrop of rock became a laboratory for psychological torture through separation from family, community, and basic human dignity. The island's history of imprisonment stretches back to 1652, when Dutch colonizers first used it to banish political prisoners, criminals, and the mentally ill from mainland society. For over 300 years, Robben Island served as South Africa's ultimate destination for those deemed too dangerous for normal incarceration. A place where political dissidents, resistance leaders, and apartheid opponents were sent to disappear from public consciousness while enduring decades of systematic degradation. During the apartheid era from 1961 to 1991, Robben Island housed over 3,000 political prisoners in conditions designed to destroy both body and spirit through methodical cruelty. The prison operated under racial classification systems that extended apartheid's dehumanization into every aspect of daily life, with different food rations, clothing, and treatment based entirely on prisoners' racial designation. African prisoners received the smallest food portions, wore short pants regardless of weather, and faced the harshest labor assignments in the island's limestone quarries. The limestone quarries where prisoners performed forced labor created particularly brutal conditions that combined backbreaking physical work with systematic health destruction. Prisoners spent 8 to 10 hours daily breaking rocks under the blazing African sun, while limestone dust created respiratory problems and the quarry's white stone reflected sunlight that caused permanent eye damage. Many former prisoners, including Mandela himself, suffered lasting vision problems from years of exposure to reflected glare without protective equipment. The prison's isolation system was designed to sever all meaningful connections between prisoners and the outside world, creating psychological torture through enforced separation from family and community. Visits were limited to 30 minutes every 6 months, conducted through glass barriers that prevented physical contact, while letters were heavily censored and often delayed for months before delivery. This isolation was particularly devastating in African cultures, where community connections form essential aspects of personal identity and mental health. Guard brutality at Robben Island was systematized and encouraged through official policies that treated political prisoners as enemies rather than criminals deserving basic human rights. Beatings, solitary confinement, and deliberate humiliation were routine aspects of prison life, while guards received training in psychological manipulation techniques designed to break prisoners' resistance and political commitment. The prison's remote location made outside oversight impossible, creating conditions where abuse could occur without witnesses or accountability. Despite these conditions, Robben Island paradoxically became what prisoners called the university, due to the extraordinary concentration of intellectual and political talent confined there. Political leaders, academics, lawyers, and activists shared knowledge and conducted informal education programs that transformed the prison into an unintended center of learning. This intellectual resistance demonstrated how human dignity could survive even the most systematic attempts at dehumanization. The island's natural environment added additional hardships to the imprisonment experience. Constant winds, cold temperatures, and isolation from the mainland created conditions that amplified the psychological effects of incarceration. The surrounding waters, known for their dangerous currents and shark populations, made escape attempts virtually impossible while serving as constant reminders of the prisoners' complete separation from freedom. Today, Robben Island operates as a museum and UNESCO World Heritage Site, with tours conducted by former political prisoners who provide first-hand accounts of apartheid-era conditions. These tour guides, many of whom spent decades imprisoned on the island, offer unique perspectives on how human resilience can survive systematic oppression while educating visitors about the costs of racial injustice. The psychological impact on visitors touring Robben Island stems from the preserved prison facilities that allow direct confrontation with spaces designed for systematic dehumanization. Mandela's cell, measuring just 2.5 by 2 meters, demonstrates the physical conditions where one of history's most important leaders spent nearly 3 decades of his life. The limestone quarry where prisoners labored provides visceral understanding of the physical hardships that accompanied psychological torture. Robben Island's transformation from prison to memorial demonstrates how spaces designed for oppression can become symbols of human triumph and reconciliation. The island serves as both historical evidence of apartheid's systematic cruelty and inspiration for contemporary human rights movements worldwide. The island represents the ultimate expression of political imprisonment, where physical isolation combined with systematic dehumanization to create conditions designed to destroy human dignity and political resistance, yet ultimately failed to break the spirits of those committed to justice and freedom. 24. Surtsey Island, Iceland, Forbidden Volcanic Laboratory. On November 14, 1963, the ocean floor erupted in violence that created one of the youngest pieces of land on Earth, a volcanic island born from underwater explosions so powerful they could be seen from space. Surtsey Island, named after the Norse fire giant Surtur, emerged from the Atlantic Ocean in a 4-year process of geological creation that provided scientists with an unprecedented opportunity to study how life colonizes virgin land. Today, this 1.4 square kilometer laboratory remains completely forbidden to the general public, protected by Icelandic law as one of the world's most pristine natural experiments. The island's birth occurred through submarine volcanic eruptions that began 130 meters below sea level, creating underwater explosions that sent steam and ash columns 10 kilometers into the atmosphere. The eruption continued for nearly 4 years as lava flows gradually built the island above sea level, creating new land at a rate scientists could observe and document in real time. This process provided the first opportunity in modern history to study primary ecological succession, how life establishes itself on completely sterile, newly formed land. Surtsey's unique value to science stems from its complete isolation from previous biological contamination. Unlike other volcanic islands that formed through geological processes occurring over longer timeframes, Surtsey emerged during an era of advanced scientific monitoring that allowed researchers to document every stage of ecological development from the moment life first arrived. This has created an unparalleled natural laboratory where scientists can study fundamental questions about evolution, ecology, and species distribution. The Icelandic government immediately recognized Surtsey's scientific importance and established the island as a nature reserve with access restrictions more stringent than most military installations. Only a handful of scientists per year receive permits to visit the island, and even these researchers must undergo decontamination procedures designed to prevent accidental introduction of non-native species. Shoes and equipment are sterilized, while clothing is restricted to prevent seeds, insects, or microorganisms from contaminating the island's natural development. The colonization process has proceeded exactly as ecological theory predicted, with species arriving through predictable patterns of wind dispersal, ocean currents, and active migration. The first plant species arrived within 6 years as seeds carried by wind currents, while bird species began nesting on the island within a decade. Today, over 25 plant species and 5 bird species have established populations, providing real-time documentation of how ecosystems develop from nothing. The island's geological composition continues evolving through natural erosion processes that demonstrate how volcanic islands change over time. Surtsey has lost approximately 1 hectare per year to wave action and erosion, shrinking from its original 2.7 square kilometers to its current size. This erosion process provides scientists with data about how volcanic islands evolve and potentially disappear, offering insights into the life cycles of oceanic island formations. UNESCO World Heritage designation in 2008 recognized Surtsey as having outstanding universal value for scientific research, while reinforcing access restrictions that protect the island's research integrity. The designation requires Iceland to maintain the island's pristine condition and continue restricting access to essential scientific research, ensuring that this natural laboratory remains uncontaminated by human activity. The prohibition against general public access extends to aviation restrictions that prevent unauthorized flyovers or approaches that might accidentally introduce foreign species. Even scientific research flights must follow strict protocols to prevent biological contamination, while photography and filming require special permits that include environmental impact assessments. Recent climate change studies have made Surtsey increasingly valuable as researchers monitor how changing ocean temperatures and weather patterns affect newly established ecosystems. The island provides baseline data about how climate change affects species colonization and ecosystem development on isolated landmasses. Information that may become crucial for understanding biodiversity changes on other islands worldwide. The island's continued protection faces challenges from increasing tourism pressure as adventure travelers seek access to unique destinations. However, Icelandic authorities maintain absolute prohibition against unauthorized visits, with violators facing substantial legal penalties and potential prosecution for environmental crimes. Research conducted on Surtsey has contributed to fundamental understanding of island biogeography, evolution, and ecological succession that influences conservation strategies worldwide. The island demonstrates how scientific knowledge can be advanced through careful protection of natural laboratories that might be destroyed through unrestricted human access. Surtsey represents the ultimate intersection of geological spectacle and scientific value, where volcanic creation produced an opportunity for unprecedented research that requires absolute protection from human interference to maintain its scientific integrity and continue providing insights into fundamental biological processes. 25. Sun Dung Cave, Vietnam underground jungle in world's largest cave. Deep within the jungles of central Vietnam lies a subterranean world so vast it contains its own weather systems, underground rivers that could swallow buildings, and jungle ecosystems thriving in perpetual darkness. Sun Dung Cave, discovered only in 2009 and open to limited exploration in 2013, represents the largest cave passage in the world by volume, a place where entire city blocks could fit within single chambers and where the physical challenges of exploration push human limits to their absolute breaking point. The cave's dimensions defy human comprehension, with the largest chamber measuring over 200 meters wide, 150 meters tall, and stretching for more than 5 kilometers through underground passages carved by an underground river over millions of years. To put this scale in perspective, the main passage could accommodate entire city blocks, including 40-story skyscrapers, while the underground river system could handle large ships navigating through chambers that dwarf most cathedrals. Discovery of Sun Dung occurred through a combination of local knowledge and international cave exploration expertise. Ho Khan, a local farmer, discovered the cave entrance in 1990 while seeking shelter from a storm, but the cave's enormous size and challenging access prevented exploration until British caving experts Howard and Deb Limbert mounted the first scientific expedition in 2009. Their initial exploration revealed chambers so large that their lights could not reach the opposite walls, while water sounds echoed from invisible distances. The cave's most terrifying challenge is the 60-meter-high Great Wall of Vietnam, a massive flowstone formation that requires technical rock climbing skills to overcome. This calcite wall, created by millions of years of mineral deposits, blocks the main passage and forces explorers to use ropes, harnesses, and advanced climbing techniques to continue deeper into the cave system. The climb occurs in complete darkness using artificial lighting, with mistakes potentially resulting in fatal falls onto jagged rock formations. The underground river system presents drowning hazards that require swimming through pools of unknown depth while wearing heavy exploration gear. Some water crossings extend for hundreds of meters through chambers where the ceiling disappears beyond light range, creating swimming conditions where exhaustion or equipment failure could easily result in drowning. The water temperature remains constant year-round, but hypothermia becomes a serious risk during extended river crossings. Perhaps most remarkable are the underground jungle ecosystems that thrive within the cave where light penetrates through collapsed ceiling sections called dolines. These underground forests contain trees over 30 meters tall, growing on soil deposits that accumulated over millennia, creating jungle environments that exist completely separate from the surface world. The dolines support complex ecosystems including birds, monkeys, and plant species that may be unique to the cave environment. The cave's most dangerous section is known as Passchendaele due to its resemblance to World War I battlefields. 600 meters of hip-deep mud that can trap explorers and make movement extremely difficult. This passage requires hours to traverse while carrying heavy equipment, with the constant risk of becoming stuck in mud that has the consistency of concrete when compressed. Rescue operations in this section would be nearly impossible due to access difficulties and the risk of equipment becoming permanently mired. Access to Son Doong remains limited to 8 permits annually through the Vietnamese government, with expeditions costing approximately $3,000 per person and requiring extensive physical training and caving experience. The selection process evaluates applicants' fitness levels, swimming ability, rock climbing skills, and psychological preparation for spending 5 days underground in challenging conditions. The 5-day, 4-night expedition through tropical jungle and underground river systems challenges even experienced adventure travelers. Participants must navigate through dense jungle for 2 days to reach the cave entrance, then spend 3 days underground exploring chambers while camping in complete darkness. The physical demands include rope climbing, river crossings, mud traverses, and carrying heavy equipment through passages that require crawling and squeezing through tight spaces. Recent discoveries within Son Doong include connections to other cave systems that may make it even larger than current measurements indicate. Ground-penetrating radar suggests additional chambers and passages that remain unexplored, while underwater sections may connect to cave systems extending far beyond the currently mapped areas. The cave's remote location in Phong Naku Bang National Park provides protection from development but complicates emergency response capabilities. Medical evacuations from deep within the cave system would require multiple days and specialized rescue equipment, making serious injuries or medical emergencies potentially fatal situations where outside help cannot reach victims quickly enough. Son Doong Cave represents the ultimate underground adventure destination, where geological forces created spaces so enormous they challenge human ability to comprehend scale, while presenting physical challenges that test the limits of human endurance and technical skill in an environment where rescue operations face nearly insurmountable logistical obstacles. 26. Skeleton Coast, Namibia. 1,000 shipwrecks and certain death. Along Namibia's Atlantic shoreline stretches a 500-kilometer coastline so hostile to human survival that it has earned the name Skeleton Coast through centuries of shipwrecks, failed rescue attempts, and bleached bones scattered across beaches where the Namib Desert meets the South Atlantic Ocean. This desolate wilderness, where over 1,000 documented shipwrecks mark the graveyard of maritime ambition, represents one of the few places on Earth where reaching land offers no salvation, only a slower, more agonizing death than drowning. The Skeleton Coast's lethal reputation stems from a perfect storm of geographical and meteorological factors that create nearly impossible survival conditions for shipwreck survivors. The cold Benguela current flows northward along the coast, creating dense fog banks that reduce visibility to near zero while generating powerful surf that drives ships onto hidden reefs and sandbars. Once wrecked, survivors face the immediate challenge of reaching shore through surf so violent it destroys lifeboats and drowns those who attempt to swim to safety. Those fortunate enough to reach the beach discover that survival depends on traversing one of the world's most hostile desert environments without water, food, or navigation equipment. The Namib Desert, stretching inland from the coast, receives less than 10 millimeters of annual rainfall while maintaining daytime temperatures that can exceed 50 degrees Celsius 122 degrees Fahrenheit. The desert's sand dunes, some reaching 300 meters in height, create navigation challenges where landmarks constantly shift and compass readings become unreliable due to magnetic interference from mineral deposits. The coast's most notorious shipwreck, the Edouard Bolin, demonstrates the futility of survival attempts in this environment. This German cargo ship ran aground in 1909, and despite the crew successfully reaching shore, all hands perished attempting to walk to civilization. Today, the ship's rusted hull lies 500 meters inland, moved by shifting sands that have since covered the area where it originally beached, providing stark evidence of how the desert literally consumes evidence of human presence. Portuguese sailors named this region as Areas do Inferno, the Sands of Hell, after early exploration attempts resulted in entire expeditions disappearing without trace. Historical records document numerous attempts to establish coastal settlements, all of which failed due to the complete absence of fresh water and the impossibility of maintaining supply lines through the desert interior. The Skeleton Coast's wildlife populations have adapted to survive in conditions that would quickly kill humans, creating an ecosystem where survival depends on biological adaptations impossible for human beings to replicate. Desert elephants travel hundreds of kilometers between water sources, while seals concentrate along the coast where cold ocean currents provide the only source of food in an otherwise barren landscape. Modern survival analysis reveals why the skeleton coast proves so deadly to humans. The combination of extreme heat, absence of fresh water, and vast distances between any form of civilization creates conditions where human survival time can be measured in hours rather than days. Dehydration occurs rapidly in the desert heat, while the nearest settlements may be hundreds of kilometers away across terrain that provides no shelter, water, or food sources. The coast shipwrecks serve as monuments to maritime disasters spanning over 500 years, with vessels ranging from 16th-century Portuguese galleons to modern cargo ships that ran aground despite advanced navigation equipment. The density of wrecks, averaging 2 ships per kilometer of coastline, demonstrates how geographical and meteorological conditions can overwhelm even modern safety systems and rescue capabilities. Recent GPS tracking of attempted rescues shows that even modern emergency response faces severe challenges in the skeleton coast environment. Helicopter operations are complicated by unpredictable weather patterns and sandstorms that can ground aircraft for days, while ground rescue attempts face the same environmental challenges that killed historical shipwreck survivors. The Namibian government has established the Skeleton Coast National Park to protect the area's unique ecosystem while acknowledging the environment's dangers through strict permit requirements and mandatory guide services for any human access. These restrictions recognize that the coast's natural beauty attracts adventure tourists who may underestimate the survival challenges that have killed thousands throughout history. Climate change appears to be intensifying the Skeleton Coast's hostile conditions, as changing ocean currents affect fog patterns and coastal weather systems. Some meteorologists suggest that warming ocean temperatures may actually increase fog formation and surf violence, making the coast even more dangerous for maritime traffic. The Skeleton Coast represents nature's perfect death trap, where geological and meteorological forces combine to create conditions that have defeated human survival attempts for over 500 years, while continuing to claim lives despite modern technology and improved understanding of the environment's dangers. 25. Sun Dung Cave, Vietnam underground jungle in world's largest cave. Deep within the jungles of central Vietnam lies a subterranean world so vast it contains its own weather systems, underground rivers that could swallow buildings, and jungle ecosystems thriving in perpetual darkness. Sun Dung Cave, discovered only in 2009 and opened to limited exploration in 2013, represents the largest cave passage in the world by volume, a place where entire city blocks could fit within single chambers and where the physical challenges of exploration push human limits to their absolute breaking point. The cave's dimensions defy human comprehension, with the largest chamber measuring over 200 meters wide, 150 meters tall, and stretching for more than 5 kilometers through underground passages carved by an underground river over millions of years. To put this scale in perspective, the main passage could accommodate entire city blocks, including 40-story skyscrapers, while the underground river system could handle large ships navigating through chambers that dwarf most cathedrals. Discovery of Sun Dung occurred through a combination of local knowledge and international cave exploration expertise. Ho Khan, a local farmer, discovered the cave entrance in 1990 while seeking shelter from a storm, but the cave's enormous size and challenging access prevented exploration until British caving experts Howard and Deb Limbert mounted the first scientific expedition in 2009. Their initial exploration revealed chambers so large that their lights could not reach the opposite walls, while water sounds echoed from invisible distances. The cave's most terrifying challenge is the 60-meter-high Great Wall of Vietnam, a massive flowstone formation that requires technical rock climbing skills to overcome. This calcite wall, created by millions of years of mineral deposits, blocks the main passage and forces explorers to use ropes, harnesses, and advanced climbing techniques to continue deeper into the cave system. The climb occurs in complete darkness using artificial lighting, with mistakes potentially resulting in fatal falls onto jagged rock formations. The underground river system presents drowning hazards that require swimming through pools of unknown depth while wearing heavy exploration gear. Some water crossings extend for hundreds of meters through chambers where the ceiling disappears beyond light range, creating swimming conditions where exhaustion or equipment failure could easily result in drowning. The water temperature remains constant year-round, but hypothermia becomes a serious risk during extended river crossings. Perhaps most remarkable are the underground jungle ecosystems that thrive within the cave where light penetrates through collapsed ceiling sections called dolines. These underground forests contain trees over 30 meters tall, growing on soil deposits that accumulated over millennia, creating jungle environments that exist completely separate from the surface world. The dolines support complex ecosystems including birds, monkeys, and plant species that may be unique to the cave environment. The cave's most dangerous section is known as Passchendaele due to its resemblance to World War I battlefields. 600 meters of hip-deep mud that can trap explorers and make movement extremely difficult. This passage requires hours to traverse while carrying heavy equipment, with the constant risk of becoming stuck in mud that has the consistency of concrete when compressed. Rescue operations in this section would be nearly impossible due to access difficulties and the risk of equipment becoming permanently mired. Access to Son Doong remains limited to 8 permits annually through the Vietnamese government, with expeditions costing approximately $3,000 per person and requiring extensive physical training and caving experience. The selection process evaluates applicants' fitness levels, swimming ability, rock climbing skills, and psychological preparation for spending 5 days underground in challenging conditions. The 5-day, 4-night expedition through tropical jungle and underground river systems challenges even experienced adventure travelers. Participants must navigate through dense jungle for 2 days to reach the cave entrance, then spend 3 days underground exploring chambers while camping in complete darkness. The physical demands include rope climbing, river crossings, mud traverses, and carrying heavy equipment through passages that require crawling and squeezing through tight spaces. Recent discoveries within Son Doong include connections to other cave systems that may make it even larger than current measurements indicate. Ground-penetrating radar suggests additional chambers and passages that remain unexplored, while underwater sections may connect to cave systems extending far beyond the currently mapped areas. The cave's remote location in Phong Naku Bang National Park provides protection from development but complicates emergency response capabilities. Medical evacuations from deep within the cave system would require multiple days and specialized rescue equipment, making serious injuries or medical emergencies potentially fatal situations where outside help cannot reach victims quickly enough. Son Doong Cave represents the ultimate underground adventure destination, where geological forces created spaces so enormous they challenge human ability to comprehend scale while presenting physical challenges that test the limits of human endurance and technical skill in an environment where rescue operations face nearly insurmountable logistical obstacles. 26. Skeleton Coast, Namibia. 1,000 shipwrecks and certain death. Along Namibia's Atlantic shoreline stretches a 500-kilometer coastline so hostile to human survival that it has earned the name Skeleton Coast through centuries of shipwrecks, failed rescue attempts, and bleached bones scattered across beaches where the Namib Desert meets the South Atlantic Ocean. This desolate wilderness, where over 1,000 documented shipwrecks mark the graveyard of maritime ambition, represents one of the few places on Earth where reaching land offers no salvation, only a slower, more agonizing death than drowning. The Skeleton Coast's lethal reputation stems from a perfect storm of geographical and meteorological factors that create nearly impossible survival conditions for shipwreck survivors. The cold Benguela current flows northward along the coast, creating dense fog banks that reduce visibility to near zero while generating powerful surf that drives ships onto hidden reefs and sandbars. Once wrecked, survivors face the immediate challenge of reaching shore through surf so violent it destroys lifeboats and drowns those who attempt to swim to safety. Those fortunate enough to reach the beach discover that survival depends on traversing one of the world's most hostile desert environments without water, food, or navigation equipment. The Namib Desert, stretching inland from the coast, receives less than 10 millimeters of annual rainfall while maintaining daytime temperatures that can exceed 50 degrees Celsius 122 degrees Fahrenheit. The desert's sand dunes, some reaching 300 meters in height, create navigation challenges where landmarks constantly shift and compass readings become unreliable due to magnetic interference from mineral deposits. The coast's most notorious shipwreck, the Edouard Bolin, demonstrates the futility of survival attempts in this environment. This German cargo ship ran aground in 1909, and despite the crew successfully reaching shore, all hands perished attempting to walk to civilization. Today, the ship's rusted hull lies 500 meters inland, moved by shifting sands that have since covered the area where it originally beached, providing stark evidence of how the desert literally consumes evidence of human presence. Portuguese sailors named this region as Areas do Inferno, the Sands of Hell, after early exploration attempts resulted in entire expeditions disappearing without trace. Historical records document numerous attempts to establish coastal settlements, all of which failed due to the complete absence of fresh water and the impossibility of maintaining supply lines through the desert interior. The Skeleton Coast's wildlife populations have adapted to survive in conditions that would quickly kill humans, creating an ecosystem where survival depends on biological adaptations impossible for human beings to replicate. Desert elephants travel hundreds of kilometers between water sources, while seals concentrate along the coast where cold ocean currents provide the only source of food in an otherwise barren landscape. Modern survival analysis reveals why the Skeleton Coast proves so deadly to humans. The combination of extreme heat, absence of fresh water, and vast distances between any form of civilization creates conditions where human survival time can be measured in hours rather than days. Dehydration occurs rapidly in the desert heat, while the nearest settlements may be hundreds of kilometers away across terrain that provides no shelter, water, or food sources. The coast shipwrecks serve as monuments to maritime disasters spanning over 500 years, with vessels ranging from 16th-century Portuguese galleons to modern cargo ships that ran aground despite advanced navigation equipment. The density of wrecks, averaging 2 ships per kilometer of coastline, demonstrates how geographical and meteorological conditions can overwhelm even modern safety systems and rescue capabilities. Recent GPS tracking of attempted rescues shows that even modern emergency response faces severe challenges in the Skeleton Coast environment. Helicopter operations are complicated by unpredictable weather patterns and sandstorms that can ground aircraft for days, while ground rescue attempts face the same environmental challenges that killed historical shipwreck survivors. The Namibian government has established the Skeleton Coast National Park to protect the area's unique ecosystem while acknowledging the environment's dangers through strict permit requirements and mandatory guide services for any human access. These restrictions recognize that the coast's natural beauty attracts adventure tourists who may underestimate the survival challenges that have killed thousands throughout history. Climate change appears to be intensifying the Skeleton Coast's hostile conditions, as changing ocean currents affect fog patterns and coastal weather systems. Some meteorologists suggest that warming ocean temperatures may actually increase fog formation and surf violence, making the coast even more dangerous for maritime traffic. The Skeleton Coast represents nature's perfect death trap, where geological and meteorological forces combine to create conditions that have defeated human survival attempts for over 500 years, while continuing to claim lives despite modern technology and improved understanding of the environment's dangers. 27. Heard Island, Antarctica remote volcanic nightmare. In the subantarctic waters of the Southern Ocean, over 4,000 kilometers from the nearest populated land, lies one of the most remote and hostile volcanic islands on Earth, a place where 70% of the landscape remains covered in glaciers while active volcanism creates conditions so extreme that human survival requires extensive preparation and specialized equipment. Heard Island, along with the nearby McDonald Islands, represents the ultimate intersection of isolation, volcanic activity, and Antarctic conditions that make it genuinely dangerous for any human presence. The island's remoteness defies comprehension in an age of global connectivity. Located 4,100 kilometers southwest of Perth, Australia, and 1,700 kilometers north of Antarctica, Heard Island sits in oceanic isolation so complete that reaching it requires weeks of travel through some of the world's most dangerous waters. The Southern Ocean surrounding the island experiences constant storms, waves that can exceed 20 meters in height, and weather conditions that challenge even modern icebreaker vessels designed for polar operations. Big Ben, the island's 2,745-meter volcanic peak, ranks among the world's most active volcanoes while maintaining one of the most hostile summits on Earth. The volcano has erupted regularly since observations began, with recent activity including lava flows, ash emissions, and pyroclastic activity that create immediate dangers for anyone on the island. The combination of volcanic heat and Antarctic cold creates weather patterns where temperatures can vary by 50 degrees Celsius within hours, while volcanic gases mix with Antarctic winds to create toxic atmospheric conditions. The island's glacier coverage presents unique survival challenges where volcanic activity undermines ice stability while creating hidden crevasses and unstable ice formations. Glacial retreat, documented through satellite imagery, reveals how volcanic heat creates rapidly changing surface conditions where safe routes can become deadly traps within hours. The interaction between volcanic activity and ice coverage creates avalanche conditions and ice falls that pose constant threats to surface travel. Weather conditions on Heard Island exceed Antarctic severity due to its exposure to Southern Ocean storm systems that generate winds consistently exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. The island experiences fewer than 20 clear days annually, with constant cloud cover, precipitation, and visibility restrictions that make navigation extremely dangerous. Temperature variations between volcanic areas and glacier zones create thermal stress conditions that challenge both equipment and human physiology. The island's ecosystem, while scientifically fascinating, provides no resources for human survival. Vegetation consists primarily of mosses and grasses that offer no nutritional value, while the only significant animal populations are seals and seabirds that migrate seasonally. Fresh water sources are limited and often contaminated by volcanic minerals, while the constant storms make fishing or marine resource gathering impossible. Access to Heard Island requires specialized polar vessels and weather windows that occur rarely and unpredictably. The nearest rescue facilities are thousands of kilometers away, making medical emergencies or equipment failures potentially fatal situations where outside assistance cannot arrive for weeks. Even planned expeditions face the constant possibility of extended isolation if weather conditions prevent scheduled evacuations. Scientific research on Heard Island requires extreme logistical preparation, including redundant safety systems, specialized cold weather and volcanic environment equipment, and contingency planning for extended isolation. Research teams must prepare for scenarios where volcanic activity, weather conditions, or equipment failures force extended stays in an environment that provides no natural shelter or resources for human survival. The island's legal status as an Australian territory provides some governmental oversight, but the extreme remoteness and hostile conditions make law enforcement or emergency response practically impossible. Unauthorized visits would face not only legal consequences but survival challenges that exceed human capabilities without extensive preparation and specialized equipment. Recent volcanic activity has intensified on Heard Island, with satellite monitoring showing increased lava flows and ash emissions that suggest heightened volcanic danger. These developments make the island even more dangerous for human presence while providing unique research opportunities for understanding volcanic processes in Antarctic conditions. The McDonald Islands, located 44 kilometers west of Heard Island, present similar dangers with the added complexity of recent volcanic activity that has dramatically altered their topography. Volcanic eruptions have doubled the size of McDonald Island since 1980, demonstrating how rapidly volcanic forces can change surface conditions and eliminate any safe landing areas. Heard Island represents the ultimate combination of isolation, volcanic danger, and Antarctic conditions that create survival challenges beyond normal human capabilities, where even scientific research requires preparation typically associated with space exploration, and where rescue operations face logistical obstacles that make survival dependent entirely on self-sufficiency and advanced preparation. 28. Diego Garcia Indian Ocean Military Base built on ethnic cleansing. In the crystal-clear waters of the Indian Ocean, on an atoll so beautiful it resembles a tropical paradise, lies one of the world's most controversial military installations. A base established through the forced removal of an entire indigenous population and maintained through legal frameworks that deny basic human rights to the people who called this place home for over 200 years. Diego Garcia represents the ultimate intersection of strategic military value and systematic human rights violations, where geopolitical necessity trumped justice and created a fortress built on ethnic cleansing. The Chagos Islands, of which Diego Garcia is the largest, were inhabited by the Chagosians, descendants of enslaved Africans and Indian workers brought to the islands during the 18th and 19th centuries. By the 1960s, This community had developed a distinct culture and identity rooted in 200 years of island life, with families, schools, churches, and economic systems that made the atolls their permanent homeland. The Shigashans spoke their own Creole language, maintained traditional fishing and farming practices, and had created a peaceful society adapted to island life. The transformation of Diego Garcia from homeland to military base began in the 1960s when British and American strategic planners identified the atoll's central location as ideal for projecting military power across the Indian Ocean, Middle East, and Asia-Pacific regions. The island's position provides equidistant access to crucial regions while maintaining isolation that enhances security and reduces political complications from neighboring countries. The forced removal of the Shigashan population represents one of the most systematic examples of ethnic cleansing conducted by democratic governments in the post-World War II era. Between 1968 and 1973, British authorities systematically removed over 2,000 Shigashans from their homes through a combination of deception, economic pressure, and outright force. Families were told they were being relocated temporarily, while others were stranded on other islands when boat services were discontinued. The deportation process involved deliberate cruelty designed to prevent any possibility of return. Shigashans were allowed to take only minimal personal belongings, with homes, businesses, and family graveyards abandoned permanently. Pet dogs were killed in front of their owners to demonstrate the finality of the removal, while families were separated and relocated to Mauritius and the Seychelles, where they faced poverty, discrimination, and cultural displacement. The legal framework justifying these deportations was established through the creation of the British Indian Ocean Territory, BIOT, in 1965, which separated the Chagos Islands from Mauritius just before that country's independence. This bureaucratic maneuver allowed Britain to claim sovereignty over the islands while denying Shigashans any legal recourse or right of return to their homeland. The military value of Diego Garcia became apparent during its development as a major US-UK base capable of projecting power across multiple continents. The facility serves as a forward operating base for strategic bombers, naval operations, and intelligence gathering that supports military operations from the Middle East to the Pacific. During conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, Diego Garcia served as a crucial staging area for B-52 and B-2 bomber operations that would have been impossible from more distant bases. Recent legal developments have challenged the legitimacy of British control over the Chagos Islands through international court proceedings that found the UK's administration to be illegal under international law. In 2019, the International Court of Justice issued an advisory opinion stating that British administration of the Chagos Islands constituted illegal occupation, while the UN General Assembly passed resolutions calling for British withdrawal from the territory. The human cost of Diego Garcia's military development extends beyond the original deportations to include the ongoing denial of Shigashan rights to return to their homeland. Many original residents have died in exile, while younger generations have grown up with only stories of a homeland they have never seen. The psychological trauma of forced displacement has affected multiple generations of Shigashan families, who maintain cultural identity despite being denied access to their ancestral lands. The 2024 agreement between the UK and Mauritius to transfer sovereignty over the Chagos Islands while maintaining the military base through a 99-year lease represents a potential resolution to the territorial dispute, though Shigashan rights to return remain unresolved. This agreement acknowledges Mauritian sovereignty while ensuring continued military operations, but fails to address the fundamental injustice experienced by the displaced population. Diego Garcia demonstrates how strategic military requirements can override human rights considerations when governments prioritize geopolitical advantages over justice for affected populations. The base represents successful military planning built on systematic human rights violations that continue to deny justice to people whose only crime was living on strategically valuable land. The ongoing controversy surrounding Diego Garcia reflects broader questions about whether democratic governments can maintain moral authority while operating facilities established through ethnic cleansing, and whether strategic military value justifies the permanent displacement of indigenous populations from their ancestral homelands. 29. Lake Natron, Tanzania. Caustic waters that mummify living creatures. In the Great Rift Valley of northern Tanzania lies a body of water so chemically hostile to life that it preserves dead animals as stone-like sculptures, while maintaining temperatures hot enough to cause severe burns to any living creature that ventures too close. Lake Natron, fed by hot springs and volcanic ash, has created one of the most extreme aquatic environments on Earth. A caustic nightmare where pH levels approach those of household ammonia and water temperatures reach levels that would cook human tissue within minutes. The lake's deadly chemistry results from millions of years of volcanic activity and mineral concentration in a closed basin where water can only escape through evaporation. The lake receives inflow from hot springs carrying high concentrations of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, and other alkaline minerals that create water with pH levels between 10.5 and 12, nearly as caustic as ammonia and capable of causing severe chemical burns to skin, eyes, and respiratory systems. Water temperatures in Lake Natron can exceed 60 degrees Celsius 140 degrees Fahrenheit in areas where hot springs feed into the lake, creating conditions where human contact would result in immediate and severe burns. The combination of extreme heat and caustic chemistry creates a double threat where thermal and chemical burns would occur simultaneously, making any accidental contact with the lake water a medical emergency requiring immediate treatment. The lake's most disturbing characteristic is its ability to preserve dead animals through a natural mummification process that transforms corpses into calcified sculptures. When animals die in or near the lake, the high sodium carbonate content draws moisture from their bodies while depositing mineral layers that create stone-like preservation. Birds that mistake the lake's mirror-like surface for safe landing areas become calcified within days, their bodies preserved in the exact positions where they died. Photographer Nick Brandt documented numerous examples of this natural mummification process, finding preserved flamingos, eagles, and other birds along the lake's shoreline in poses that suggest they died while attempting to take flight or land. These calcified corpses serve as permanent warnings about the lake's lethal properties, while creating a surreal landscape where death becomes art through chemical preservation. The lake's hostile environment supports only specialized extremophile organisms, bacteria and algae that have evolved to survive in conditions that would be immediately fatal to most life forms. These organisms, primarily Spirulina platensis, give the lake its characteristic red coloration during certain seasons while serving as the primary food source for the millions of lesser flamingos that breed at Lake Natron despite its dangerous conditions. The flamingo population presents one of nature's most remarkable examples of life thriving in hostile conditions, with over 2 million birds using Lake Natron as their primary breeding ground. The flamingos have evolved specialized feeding mechanisms and physiological adaptations that allow them to consume the lake's alkaline algae while avoiding the caustic effects that would kill other bird species. However, even these adapted birds face dangers from the lake's extreme conditions, with chicks sometimes becoming trapped in salt deposits that form around their legs. Human communities living near Lake Natron face constant health risks from exposure to alkaline dust and vapors that can cause respiratory problems and skin irritation. Local Maasai people have traditional knowledge about the lake's dangers and maintain careful distance from the water, while using less alkaline sections for limited salt harvesting under carefully controlled conditions. The lake's remote location in the East African Rift Valley complicates emergency medical response for anyone suffering chemical burns or other injuries from lake exposure. The nearest medical facilities capable of treating severe chemical burns are hundreds of kilometers away, making serious exposure incidents potentially fatal due to delayed treatment rather than the initial injury severity. Recent climate change effects have intensified Lake Natron's already extreme conditions as increasing temperatures and changing precipitation patterns affect water levels and concentration of alkaline minerals. Lower water levels increase mineral concentration while higher air temperatures increase evaporation rates that concentrate the caustic chemistry even further. Industrial interest in Lake Natron's mineral deposits has periodically threatened to disrupt the lake's ecosystem through mining operations that could affect water chemistry and flamingo breeding patterns. However, the lake's extreme conditions make industrial operations extremely challenging and expensive while providing natural protection against most forms of development. Scientific research at Lake Natron focuses on extremophile organisms that may provide insights into how life could exist on other planets with hostile chemistry. However, research operations require extensive safety equipment and protocols to protect researchers from chemical exposure while studying organisms that thrive in conditions immediately dangerous to human life. Lake Natron represents nature's ability to create environments so chemically hostile they exceed human survival capabilities, while supporting specialized life forms that demonstrate biology's remarkable adaptability to extreme conditions. The lake serves as both scientific laboratory and natural warning about the chemical forces that can make water, essential for life, into a substance capable of mummifying living creatures on contact. 30. Mammoth Cave, Restricted Areas, Kentucky. Endless passages of death. Beneath the rolling hills of south-central Kentucky extends the world's longest known cave system, a subterranean labyrinth of over 426 mapped miles that represents only a fraction of passages that may extend for thousands of additional miles through limestone formations that create perfect conditions for human disorientation, entrapment, and death. Mammoth Cave's restricted areas contain unmapped passages where explorers face navigation challenges so complex that wrong turns can lead to permanent disappearance in underground spaces that may never be discovered by rescue teams. The cave system's formation through millions of years of groundwater dissolution created a three-dimensional maze of passages connecting at multiple levels, with chambers so vast that early explorers' torches could not illuminate their boundaries. The Green River drainage system carved these passages through limestone bedrock, creating conditions where underground rivers could change course over geological time, leaving dry passages that intersect in patterns too complex for human comprehension without detailed mapping. The most famous death in Mammoth Cave history occurred in 1925 when Floyd Collins became trapped in nearby sand cave during an exploration attempt that captured national attention for 18 days. Collins had discovered the cave entrance and was attempting to map a new passage when a rock shifted and pinned his leg, trapping him in a space too narrow for effective rescue operations. Despite enormous efforts involving hundreds of rescuers and national media coverage, Collins died before rescue teams could free him, demonstrating how cave exploration can quickly become fatal when passages collapse or shift. The cave's 5 distinct levels of passages create three-dimensional navigation challenges where explorers can become lost even with artificial lighting and modern equipment. Passages connect vertically through natural shafts and horizontal tunnels that create maze-like conditions where familiar landmarks may be visible from multiple routes, leading to confidence in navigation that proves false when explorers attempt to retrace their paths. Underground river systems within Mammoth Cave present drowning hazards during periods of high water when surface rainfall causes rapid flooding in lower passages. Some sections of the cave system flood completely during storms, creating conditions where explorers can become trapped by rising water levels that block exit routes. The cave's drainage patterns are complex and unpredictable, with water levels that can rise several feet within hours during heavy precipitation. The restricted areas of Mammoth Cave contain passages that remain unmapped due to their dangerous conditions and accessibility challenges. These sections include unstable ceiling areas where limestone collapse creates ongoing dangers, narrow passages that require technical climbing skills to navigate safely, and deep vertical shafts where falls would be fatal. Access to these areas requires special permits and technical expertise that most recreational cavers do not possess. Modern cave rescue operations in Mammoth Cave face logistical challenges that can take days to overcome due to the distances involved and the difficulty of moving rescue equipment through narrow passages. The cave's size means that rescue teams may need to travel for hours underground to reach victims, while medical evacuation requires specialized techniques for moving injured people through spaces where standard emergency equipment cannot be used. The psychological effects of extended underground travel in Mammoth Cave can include claustrophobia, disorientation, and panic attacks that impair judgment and increase risks of accidents or poor decisions. The constant darkness, uniform temperature, and absence of natural time cues create sensory deprivation conditions that can affect mental stability during extended exploration periods. Wildlife within Mammoth Cave includes endangered bat populations affected by white nose syndrome, a fungal disease that has killed millions of bats throughout North America. Human disturbance of bat hibernation areas can weaken bats' immune systems and contribute to disease transmission, while cave exploration during sensitive seasons can disrupt reproduction and survival cycles. The cave's connection to surface water systems creates environmental concerns where contamination from surface activities can affect underground water quality and ecosystem health. Agricultural runoff, Sewage systems and industrial activities in the surrounding area can impact underground streams and pools that support cave-adapted species found nowhere else on Earth. Recent discoveries within Mammoth Cave include new passages that extend the map system's length while revealing additional unmapped areas that may contain thousands of additional miles of passages. Ground-penetrating radar and other technological advances suggest that the currently mapped system represents only a small percentage of the total cave network, with vast areas remaining completely unexplored. Climate change effects on Mammoth Cave include altered precipitation patterns that affect underground water levels and flooding risks, while changing surface temperatures influence cave atmosphere and air circulation patterns. These environmental changes may affect cave stability and safety conditions while altering ecosystems that depend on stable underground conditions. Mammoth Cave's restricted areas represent some of the most challenging underground exploration opportunities in the world, where the combination of vast scale, complex navigation, and genuine physical dangers create conditions that test human limits while providing access to underground spaces that few people will ever experience safely.